Don't we all love summer vacation, relaxing, laying out by the pool, barbecues, hitting the beach, doing, well, nothing? Well, how about a summer vacation from your house payments? With SaveWithConrad.com, you can do just that. Reduce your monthly payments by making the equity you built up in your home work for you. You can roll together those high interest rate credit cards into one lower monthly payment and perhaps access some of that newfound equity to turn your house into your dream home with no money out of pocket. And how about this? You get to skip your next two house payments. That's right. You won't have to make your June or your July house payment. You're done until August 1st. Go right now to SaveWithConrad.com. Let my team run the numbers for you for free. There's no obligation, and if we can't help you save some cash, we won't waste your time. And did I mention we're offering a 3-year guarantee right now? That's right. That means if at any point interest rates improve over the next 3 years, you get a free refi. That's right. No new lender fees from us. So you get to save money now without wasting money later when the rates improve on a whole second set of closing costs. Why not go to SaveWithConrad.com and get a guarantee? Save money now and save money later with your friend in the mortgage business. That's me, Conrad Thompson at SaveWithConrad.com. Shoot me an email at Conrad@SaveWithConrad.com. Give us a call at 888-425-0105. Or get yourself a quick quote, even talk to a live person right now at SaveWithConrad.com. NMLS number 2129, equal housing lender. Let's take a summer vacation from house payments at SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. John, what's going on, man?
I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm in Bruce's chair, and I'm still here.
Well, you're pretty fired up about it, too, and we're excited that you're with us today because we have got a topic that I know you've been looking forward to talking about ever since you sat in Bruce's seat. The one and only Undertaker. We're going to be talking about the legacy of the Undertaker. And before we do a deep dive on that, do you consider him, I know our topic last week was the Godfather, Charles Wright, but on some level, is the Undertaker the Godfather of WWE, do you think?
100%. No doubt about it. Not on some level, he is 100%. He's the guy. Vince called him when he needed things. He was the ultimate break glass guy. You know, nobody wants to carry the title when business is down. When the business is up, everybody wants the title, but you get blamed for stuff, you know, when business is down. He called Undertaker under all circumstances. You know, Triple H was much in the same role. Undertaker was there a little bit longer, but Undertaker was the guy that he called him when you needed something. You need a fail-safe. When guys, you didn't know if your guys were going to show up. Undertaker was at a lot of pay-per-views that he did not headline, but in case something happened. He was always the fail-safe guy, and he was always the guy that, you know, I don't know how much, you know, Vince, you know, talk about loving their kids. You know, if Shane McMahon is here, Undertaker's right here. You know, that's he's one of Vince's favorite guys, but he's also one of wrestling's favorite guys. He was the locker room leader, not because of his tenure and not because of his position, but because of who he is.
I can't wait for us to talk more about The Undertaker. Before we do, we should address the big news right at the top of the show. We've got a new WWE World Heavyweight Champion. We should reveal because of travel. We are actually recording in advance of SmackDown. Normally, we're live on Monday, but John and I are both traveling. But this past Monday, Gunther beat Jey Uso clean in the middle, and he is now the man in WWE. I'm sure Rikishi's happy because Jay finally got a singles main event, but this is probably not what he imagined or hoped for. I kind of think this is a storytelling device. I mean, Night of Champions is right not too far from now in Saudi Arabia, and it feels like we're ripe for a rematch. And the rumor and innuendo is about a month from now, we're going to see maybe Goldberg's last match in Atlanta. Allegedly, there was some rumors he may be working with Gunther. Maybe there's a way to get there, but I'm also seeing other reports that Jey Uso might be looking at a tag team situation again. There's a report that I read last night that I guess WWE wants to put the Usos back together. I mean, what a run they had. What do you think about Gunther's win, and what do you hope is next for Jey?
I like the fact – I like what they did. I don't know where they're headed with this, but I kind of like the fact that they changed up things. You know, you go in different spurts. So, you went through, like I remember in around 2000s, right in there in the turn of the decade, you were changing titles all the time. Then all of a sudden you have guys who hold a title for a very long time. You had Roman, you had Cody, you had the guys who are holding titles a long time. It's good to switch stuff up. You never know what might happen. We used to always say we should switch some titles on the house shows just so people know that something could happen. I think it adds to the intrigue of the show when you don't just have a champion that is not going to lose. Look, Jay's still in the main event picture. He's still Jay Uso. I don't care if he has a title or not. He's still in the main event picture. The Usos back together, I think that's fantastic. And it gives Jay a longer shelf life. Jay, fortunately, is part of one of the greatest tag teams of all time. And you could argue that they may end up being the greatest tag team of all time. He can go from being this great singles main event guy to being in this great tag team back and forth. Man, that is a long shelf life for a guy, because now you're not just limited to one thing you could do. I think it's fantastic. I don't know what they're doing with Goldberg, but obviously Goldberg against Gunther, you need a big heel like Gunther, a big, tough guy like Gunther. I think the perfect matchup for Goldberg if that's where they go.
Well, listen, we're armchair quarterbacking. We don't know. And I know that people debate this, and it's probably hard for people who haven't been in this circumstance to understand. But it's not like you and I are calling Bruce saying, what are y'all going to do next week? Like, that's just not what you do.
Right.
But I do kind of think if they really are going to do Goldberg's last match in Atlanta on Saturday night's main event, man, that makes me excited for WCW, and I can really get excited about that idea. I, for one, would be watching it live and not miss a minute of it, because I just love the nostalgia of that, of a guy having this last match where, the state where he played college football, and the town where he won the world title, and the town where he played in the NFL, and just the spiritual home of WCW in Atlanta. So I hope that that's where it's headed. And we're led to believe that, hey, he might be working with Gunther. And, well, I could see that maybe there's a circumstance, hypothetically, especially with Seth running around with that Money in the Bank case. Maybe there's a good story there. But I do hope that we get to see more of Jay as a singles. I don't know why I find myself pulling for Jay so much, but it feels like, I don't know if the audience created him this way or the storyline has, but he feels like the ultimate underdog in wrestling right now, and I'm pulling for him.
Yeah, I am too, and I think the whole WWE universe is. He is so freaking good and so freaking over. Yes. I mean, that Jey Uso, that when he walks out, the whole place changes. There are a few guys in every single generation. When you walk out, the building changes. When he walks out, the building changes. It's not a normal match. A star, and a massive star has entered the arena. I think Jey Uso is I'd love to see him continue in some type of singles capacity. I like the idea of this. They're doing this last match with Goldberg. This is the perfect time to do it, obviously. Goldberg was the one star that was kicking our ass that was created by WCW. And I'm not sure, he just happened. And you got to give him credit because he happened under their watch. But he just happened. All of a sudden, this guy just took off. I remember the first time I saw him do that spear, I'm sitting there with Barry Windham, and I said, what was that? And Barry goes, that was just the Fez press. And then we saw the replay. He goes, no, it wasn't. He almost broke the guy in half. Like, oh, my God. Goldberg was great. I mean, he came out. He was so freaking over. And I think it's great that they're going to do something for him. It looks like it have some type of last match.
I really hope that that's what happens, but I'm also really excited to see what's next for Jay. But I think the superstar that everybody's talking about and wondering what's next for right now when it comes to the WWE side of things is Ron Killings. He came back on Monday Night Raw. We, of course, saw him on the pay-per-view this past weekend. And you and I talked about that, but we were live on Monday afternoon. We didn't know what to expect when it came to Ron Killings on Monday Night Raw. I was kind of surprised that Triple H posted a picture of him backstage prior to the show in the hoodie and the gloves and the whole deal. And then in the middle of the show, he took over and jumped on the announce desk and grabbed the microphone and cut a hell of a promo. The crowd was really behind him. And he said something like, don't let nobody tell you that you don't matter. Don't let nobody tell you that your voice don't matter. They heard, listened, they understood, and I'm back because of y'all. Huge promo saying he's here to be taken seriously. He's not a joke. He's not R-Truth. He's Ron the Truth Killings, and he cut his hair with a pair of scissors, cut his dreadlocks off. I mean, the crowd was all over this. And in the first 24 hours after Monday Night Raw, the title switch, which is obviously a big deal, the main event of the show, and we've got a new world heavyweight champion, had around 900,000 views. Meanwhile, R-Truth's promo standing on the announce desk did 2.2 million views. Once again, proving that story is more important than titles or bangers or any of that. What'd you think of Ron Killing's promo?
I think it's very telling, the 2.2 million views, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, that tells you what people want to see. I thought his promo was great, and I thought that Killings can deliver. I always called him Truth, but Truth can deliver. You know, sometimes when the fans want something, you give it to them, and it's like the dog that caught the car. Like, what the hell are you going to do now? The guy can't deliver. I mean, there are a lot of times like that. You know, you see a gimmick that comes along and people say, oh, well, the gimmick's cute. We want the gimmick. We want the gimmick. There's a reason you don't see it very often. And all of a sudden you give it to the fans and it shits the bed. Killings is not going to do that. He's been around a long time. He's gotten over everywhere he's been. He's gotten over the silly stuff, the dumb stuff, the serious stuff, the rap stuff. He's gotten over everything he's done. He is going to deliver. I'm really excited for Truth. I think it's wonderful he's back. I think it's wonderful that the fans wanted him, and it's wonderful that they got him, and they got a guy that's not going to go out there and you wonder, okay, we got him now. What do we do with him? You're going to have a lot of things to do with Truth because he's that talented.
I can't wait to see what they do with him next, and I do hope they continue to slot him in the main events. I mean, he's getting the reaction, like, you know, timing is everything, and now is the time. I think you're an advocate for that too, right? We've got to push
100%.
Ron to the top of the card right now, right?
You have to. I don't know if he becomes world champion or not. I know I saw Booker's comment on it, and I agree with Booker. He'd be a great world champion, and I think the fans would buy it. Obviously, they'd buy it. You know, what is he? Is he 53 years old? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, but it looks fantastic.
Yes.
I mean, you know, Foreman came along, knocks out Moore at 45. You know, the world's changed. You know, 53 used to be ancient and grandfathers, and guys would, you know, you'd see Booker's maybe 53 years old. You call him old man. Now you got talent that is. The world's changed. People are, you know, look at LeBron James, playing at age 40 and still at the top of his game. People are different now, and I think Truth could be a world champion. I hope he is.
It's interesting too, because I mean, I never even considered the idea that he might win the world title, but I would absolutely love that. I think that would be fantastic. But I think the oldest WWE champion in history, do you want to take a guess who it is?
Flair.
Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon was
right.
54 years old in 21 days. So yeah, he's a year younger than Vince was. But it's funny because we looked at Vince back then like he was an old guy, but I don't think anybody looks at Ron Killings that way.
Nobody looks at him. I mean, he looks the same as he did. He's like Rey Mysterio. Mysterio's going to wrestle until he's 185. When I was 39 or 40 when I won the championship, I was one of the oldest champions then. But now business has changed. The world's changed. Nutrition's changed. People just are healthier longer. Truth looks like he's 28 years old. I mean, age is a number. It's like Satchel Paige used to say, how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? And that's true. You know, some guys are 40 years old and they look like they're freaking 80. I got old college buddies. You know, some of them are just fat as they can be and barely get around. I got some that, you know, are out there doing triathlons and shit. You know, it's just age is just a number.
I, for one, can't wait to see what they're doing next with Ron Killings. And I think we're all interested. So now it's just a matter of seeing where the creative goes. And I'm interested in the creative on this new TV show. I don't know if you saw this, John, but Deadline, which is the #1 Hollywood news magazine or industry trade, kind of like the Observer, I guess. They reported that Netflix is developing a pro wrestling drama series. I think they're loosely calling it Tuesday Night Titans. If that sounds familiar, you're an old wrestling fan. The series follows a tenacious writer who risks her career in the big leagues to recruit her estranged childhood best friend, who is a quote unquote jobber on the indies, to join the same behemoth company they idolized in their youth. Their destinies become entangled as they battle personal demons, ruthless colleagues, and their complicated history in an industry where kayfabe isn't confined to the ring, but bleeds into every aspect of their lives. Man, I have really, really high hopes for this, John. Usually when we've seen things like this, where there's been a wrestling television show, it was kind of campy and tongue-in-cheek. But if they really lean into the politics of pro wrestling, this could be a sleeper hit. This could be like Succession for wrestling, Game of Thrones for wrestling.
Yeah.
Like if you're a wrestling fan, or even if you're not a fan, I could see this being really, really attractive, even to invite new fans into the fold. Don't you think?
I completely agree. Look, most of the time we've had like wrestling series and stuff, they were done by just dumbasses. They're done by old carny guys that were in wrestling that think they could do a TV show. This is going to be done by Netflix with TV guys that are doing a wrestling show. That's completely different. That's why, you might have something, you hate to even think about it being like with Game of Thrones, people will laugh at you, for even making that comparison, but that's why you could have something like a Game of Thrones, because you're going to have TV guys doing episodic television, which they're very good at, not a bunch of old wrestling carnies saying, hey, let's do a TV show. We're good at putting wrestling together. None of that stuff never worked. I think Netflix will do a good job. By the way, this Netflix partnership with WWE has been huge for WWE, because the dynamic pricing model that they have that Netflix developed, that's one of the dynamic models being used by all these sports groups now. This dynamic, that's why they're making so much freaking money, but a lot of it was developed by Netflix.
I can't wait to see how this shakes out. Of course, this is the first report, so we're probably a ways away. I do want to ask you one more piece of news items before we move on. Mariah May, we've previously seen in AEW last week, or I guess as folks are listening to this, 2 weeks ago, we saw her make her NXT debut. And we didn't really know her name. They kind of did this to Ricky Starks last year too, where we see them 1 week, and then the following week is when we learn who they are and all that jazz. So the new name she's going to be going by in WWE is Blake Monroe. And I have to admit, that wasn't a name that was on my radar. I thought, okay, they're going with the whole Marilyn Monroe thing, and she does wear white. Okay, that's it. But then when I looked on Twitter, I saw, I guess, once upon a time, there was an adult film star who used that name.
Oh, my God. Really?
And I was not familiar with her work, but she looks like she's a hell of a hand. But I am.
A hell of a hand?
Well, I don't know how many. She's got the same number of.
She's a hell of a hand?
Yeah, she's a hell of a hand, I guess.
Yeah.
Look at her. I mean, she looks like a blue chip athlete. But and by the way, the lady in the left there, the OG Blake Monroe, if you're curious, has the same number of 5-star matches as Kurt Angle. So
now wait a minute. The picture of Blake Monroe there, is that like the picture of the porn star Blake Monroe?
The adult actress on the left is the original Blake Monroe, who was a mattress actress, we'll say. And on the right is
I've never heard the term mattress actress. I'm having a really educational experience today. She's a hell of a hand. She's a mattress actress, and she looks. I don't want to be disrespectful to the new Blake Monroe, but she looks very much like the old Blake Monroe. I mean, as far as the look.
Thing is, it's like, okay, is this now? I don't know if you remember this, but a few years ago,
I mean, look at that. I mean, seriously, the folks that are out there, look at that. I mean, I thought it was the same person, and I don't mean disrespect to this young lady. They're both very pretty, but yeah, roll tide. But they look like that could be the same person. How does this happen?
Well,
I mean, you got some like porn aficionado that made this name.
Well, I mean, and in fairness, I don't know that she was, and I have to admit, when I first heard the name, it didn't register to me. Like, I'm not, and
it probably didn't with them. I
can't imagine. So I'm just saying, it's not like they named her Christy Canyon. It's not like they named her Tracy Lords. It's not like some old name that people are like, why does that name sound?
You know what I love about this? You're like me. You're like my dad. My dad used to say, "Oh, that's Sophia Loren. That's the hottest woman in the world." I said, Dad, she's 80.
Yes.
And my dad would say, "Well, I'm 82." And yeah, Googie, that's a great point. Your porn star references are a little bit dated.
Well, when I see that photo,
which mine would be too.
I have to admit, I Google imaged Blake Monroe, and I put a word at the end that I thought, well, this will get the real one. And I took a look at that, and I could tell based on fashion and hairstyling that she was she was over when Brutus Beefcake was over, if you know what I'm saying.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah, so she may have actually been at the original SummerSlam. We'll have to find her. Maybe we'll get her on the show next week. But if you were WWE,
is the original Blake Monroe still alive?
This is what we got to get to the bottom of, John, because I want to get the real Blake Monroe live on the program with us, and let's just ask her some questions.
I think that's a highly appropriate, be good investigative journalism.
Absolutely. Are you going to hit her with the clothesline from hell?
You dang right I will.
Oh, God. Hey, so I want to ask, if you were WWE, and again, this may be an issue, it's not an issue. I'm trying to gauge from your perspective, should they change the name? I bring this up because there was a trio, gosh, maybe like 10 years ago. It was a faction of ladies, and whatever name they came up with, whatever their nickname was, submission something or other, I forget. I guess there was an adult opportunity like that online. So when you Googled it, that
there's an opportunity to get submitted online and like by a mattress actress.
Well, I don't think that they were like hiring it. I think they were saying, hey, come watch us. We're the so-and-so group. And it was the exact same name as a faction. Do you think WWE
were they good fans?
I'm not familiar with their work, but I'd be glad to call some spots and just see how it goes. So I don't even know what we're doing at this point. I wish Blue Chew was sponsoring this week because this would be a great way to transition. Would you change this name or would you let it ride? Is it that big a deal? Because when I asked Eric Bischoff, Eric said, hey, you know what? I just don't think with sensitivities the way it is right now, I just don't think it's that big a deal. I don't think it's that important. But if you recall, once upon a time, Triple H said, hey, so-and-so's not in the Hall of Fame because what if they Googled that person's name and all that sort of stuff? And that never even crossed my mind until he said it. But I think about the people in my life who were big-time women's wrestling fans, and it's my girls. So now my girls are 21, but I'm saying if my girls were 9, all those little kids have a tablet or something. It's natural you look up your favorite stuff. Like, I get that. Is this a cause for concern, or is that not even really worth mentioning now in 2020?
I'm trying to think if I'm heard, would it bother me? And I think it kind of be kind of cool to have like this cool heritage of this name of somebody that nobody knows about. And it's got like this cool kind of wink, wink. By the way, there's this old porn star that had the same name and we look remarkably similar. But I think I'd change it. I think I'd just, the deep six that we had a name, we thought it worked, and turns out that name was used, and people are going to bring WWE fans are two things. They're brutal and they're smart, and there's no telling what they'll come up with because of that name. So now it might be to her benefit. I mean, sometimes you have like, look, one of the hardest things. I remember when wrestlers, you had like big fat wrestlers. They always say, you had some of them would say, man, don't call me fat out there. The fans will chant it. Oh, yeah, they're not chanting anything right now. Your fat ass is going to be unemployed if they don't start chanting something. So at least they're chanting something. Some of the guys would go out there and go, hey, man, call me fat, so call me whatever you want. Let's get fans chanting anything, because you got to be noticed. And there's a difference there, and so maybe it works to her advantage. I don't know. I think I'd probably change it, but I don't know. It's kind of fun.
I, for one, don't think it's that big of a deal now, but I do get why they might want to pivot. But I hate it for her because it does feel like she comes in with a little bit of momentum, and you hate to have a little bit of controversy, but maybe in 2025.
What a coincidence, though. I mean, this they look remarkably alike. They got the same name. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, listen, what can I say? Blonde hair is going to make you a classic. Speaking of classic, at True Classic, the mission goes beyond fit and fabric. It's all about helping guys show up with confidence and purpose. Their gear fits right, it feels amazing, and it's priced so guys everywhere can step into confidence without stepping out of their budget. But what really sets them apart, it's not just the fit or fabric. It's the intention behind everything they do. True Classic was built to make an impact. Whether it's helping men show up better in their daily lives, giving back to underserved communities, or making people laugh with ads that, don't take themselves too seriously, True Classic leads with purpose. And I've been wearing True Classic for a while now. You can feel the difference the moment you throw one on. It's tailored where you want it. It's relaxed where you need it. There's no bunching. There's no stiff fabric. There's no BS. Just a clean, effortless fit that actually works for real life. So forget overpriced designer brands and ditch the disposable fast fashion. True Classic is built for comfort, built to last, and built to give back. Go grab them right now at Target, Costco, or head on over to trueclassic.com/STW to get hooked up today. One more time, to support the show and get the best deal possible, don't go to Target and Costco. Go right now to trueclassic.com/STW. I get it. If you're in a pinch and you need it today, you got to go to Target. But hey, help a brother out. Go to trueclassic.com/STW. John, there's one more thing I wanted to put on your radar before we got going with our topic today, which is the legacy of The Undertaker. Thank you for joining us. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications bell. John and I are usually live on YouTube, and you would have had an opportunity to interact with John and ask him anything you want. You just got to go hit that button right now at somethingtowrestle.com. That's our YouTube. We'll just make it easy for you to type in your browser and point you right there. somethingtowrestle.com. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. John, I want to talk to you about something that I didn't feel like was controversial, but maybe I'm wrong. It surprises me. But WWE dispatched a group of superstars to go wish the United States Army happy birthday. Cody Rhodes was, of course, the leader of the pack. Tiffany Stratton and others were involved. And they sang to the troops happy birthday to celebrate the anniversary of the creation of the United States Army. And to my surprise, there's a whole lot of political talk in the comments, like, once upon a time, the WWE champion and the top guys and gals, they went to entertain the troops and it didn't feel political. I get it's a different time now, but can we really villainize WWE superstars for supporting our troops in 2025? It feels weird. I guess we see the report here. It's Cody Rhodes, Tiffany Stratton, and the Street Profits took stage as what's described as a Trump rally to celebrate 250 years of the U.S. Army. But see, even that, a Trump rally, like, he's not campaigning. He's just the president now. Like, I don't know. I hate that. And I'm not trying to have a political conversation. That's not what our podcast is about. But should WWE stop supporting the troops? That feels weird to me.
Absolutely not. And they shouldn't stop supporting the president of the United States of America. It's absolute bullshit. There are bunch of so many snowflakes out there that get their little feelings hurt over anything. It's just bullshit. I don't care if it's Biden, Kamala, or Trump. Whoever's the president, you're supposed to support them. And there are always going to be policies you don't agree with. You know, I remember when Trump was running the first time was president, I had said something on Fox, and it wasn't about Trump. It was about the economy, and Trump retweeted it. Took out there and said, "Hey, thanks, John Layfield, JC Layfield, added JC Layfield. Appreciate that. We're doing a great job building the economy, blah, 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 blah." And they got like 75,000 right away likes and stuff, you know, because the president of the United States retweeted it. And Vince called me in. He goes, "Hey, John, you can't take a political stand like this." You know, he wanted me to be a little more, you know, unbiased. And I said, "Vince, look at the tape." I said nothing about the president. It was about something with the economic policies that really didn't have to do with him. He just took credit for it. And I said, "But it's pretty cool. The president of the United States retweeted me." And Vince agreed. He goes, "You know what? You're right." He goes, "Maybe we're overthinking this." I think we're overthinking it. You know, we had Bush that supported us with the tribute to the troops. We had Obama support us with tribute to the troops. It was completely nonpartisan. And this stuff now that people are so polarizing, you can't support the president of the United States. Now, I don't give a shit if you voted for Trump or not. He's the president. You support him. If you don't like him, vote him out. If you don't like him, speak out against him. But you get an offer from the president of the United States to come celebrate the military.
Yes.
With her 250th birthday coming up. That is a huge deal. You're going with the president of the United States? We had back in the 80s, we wouldn't have anybody that would let us go anywhere and support anything. This is how far the business has changed. Wrestling is now accepted everywhere, and people are mad about that. Give me a freaking break.
Yeah,
bunch of snowflakes, just a bunch of damn snowflakes, and just looking for something to get mad at.
It feels to me, and again, I'm not nearly as political as some of my friends, but like they're supporting the army. Like, I thought we were always supposed to support the troops. Like, set the politics aside. Whoever the president is, but it's a freaking in support of our troops. I don't know. I, for one, am always going to be on board with let's go celebrate our military and let's honor our troops. And I mean, we have Memorial Day, we have Veterans Day. We can't have Cody Rhodes go sing happy birthday. It
Right
feels
to the
like
troops. And so the president of the United States is there. I mean, there were times when wrestling was so thought of so badly, you wouldn't have a local elected official that
That's
would
right.
be surrounded by wrestlers out there. And now we have the president of the United States, and we're celebrating the 250th birthday of the military. I mean, to me, it's just crazy. And look, by the way, I voted for Gerald Briscoe. I really did. I wrote in Gerald Briscoe because I didn't want to vote for either one of them. So don't talk to me about who I voted for. That's who I voted for was Jerry Briscoe. And so, but people get so worked up on this shit. It makes no sense whatsoever. Give me a break. You don't like the president? I get it. Half the country doesn't. Half the country does. I get he's polarizing. If Kamala was in there, she'd be just probably just as polarizing.
Hypothetically, what do you think Mr. Briscoe's platform would have been if we would have really gotten a whisper campaign going and we got a movement and we got Briscoe installed as the president of the United States? What would his first order of business be?
Oh my God, he would burn all the Christopher Columbus statues is what he would do.
Oh,
First thing he would do. Yeah, because he's so mad that his ancestors didn't build a wall to keep Columbus out. Because with the Columbus, claims he discovered them and, had some genocide and slavery issues. Other than that, Columbus was a wonderful person. One of the worst human beings of all time. Great seller. First thing he would do is he would tear down all the Christopher Columbus statues and ban the name forever. Then he would make the name Wahoo into a national park in Oklahoma, I believe is what he would do second. So I think those two things would be the top of his agenda. He would ban everything with Christopher Columbus, and then he would make Wahoo the name of the national park for all of Oklahoma.
I got to tell you, I'm feeling pretty damn patriotic right now. I think we may have to get that going in time for 2028. What say you?
I think Mr. Briscoe would be a wonderful president.
Well, you know what? Let's just think about, because he's going to need a running mate. What about Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw? It's available now everywhere you enjoy podcasts. If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button right now. Yes, it's on YouTube, but it's also on Apple and Spotify and everybody else. It's called Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. John and Mr. Briscoe have had a who's who of guests through the years, probably hundreds of guests at this point, and you don't want to miss it. Go check it out. It's Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. Before we get into...
And by the way, for over 20 plus years, I've sent Mr. Briscoe a note every Thanksgiving and every Christopher Columbus Day, telling him how happy we were that Columbus discovered them. And telling him thank you so much for getting the settlers food and stuff. Sorry about shooting them in the back and taking all their land and killing all the buffalo. We apologize for that, but appreciate them getting through Thanksgiving. It's a wonderful holiday, and Christopher Columbus is a good man. Not really, but I tell him that.
I'm getting why you and Bruce are such good friends now. My God,
I'm not kidding you. I've sent him a note every Thanksgiving and every Christopher Columbus Day for the last 20 plus years.
It's unbelievable. Well, listen, it's a lock that you're going to do that every holiday you get a chance. And you've had some other locks thanks to 5 Best Bets. As you and I are recording, we are knee deep in the NBA Finals, and I know baseball's cranked up. What's really tickling your fancy at 5 Best Bets? And just explain to our listeners what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah, I had 5 Best Bets. That's the Twitter name, X name. We also got it on our YouTube channel. Stories of Briscoe and Bradshaw put out a video almost every day about 5 Best Bets. Cover what I think are the best bets and the bets that I'm making, by the way. So we're not selling anything. We're not trying to sell a subscription. It's all free. Just telling you what I'm doing. Mr. Briscoe and I love talking baseball. There's some great things happening in baseball. Aaron Judge is having one of the greatest years of any batter in history. He's having a better year right now than the guys from the steroid era. I mean, it's unbelievable. Barry Bonds' year, people thought they'd never replicate it. Judge is having a year that replicates that. Skewball is pitching his ass off in Detroit, and you got the series that Oklahoma City everybody thought would take in 5. They're now down 2-1. There's a lot of good stuff happening in sports right now. I'm having a lot of fun betting on Sports Daily, putting out the videos, putting out at 5 Best Bets, at least what I'm doing. Also put out some extra bets like prop bets, like strikeout bets, Nerfies. They call them no runs first inning, which is the most fun bet in the world. It's the most nervous bet in the world because one big hit kills your bet if you're betting against it. But it's just a lot of fun, just having some fun with 5 Best Bets.
I like that we're all learning, because I have to admit I was not too familiar with no fees until you started talking about it here on the program, and I started asking some of my buddies, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we do that every day." So
It's all odds. You know, you look at pitchers and like pitchers will be like 10-2, 11-1. Then you look at the teams that score in the first inning. It's amazing how many pitchers will have like a 5 ERA, but not give up runs in the first inning. So they're pitching really well against the best batters, because you put your best batters, 1 through 4 in that first inning. They're pitching very well first time through the order, but they're not very good later. So you look at these odds. It's just a lot of fun to look at the odds and match it up with the teams and try to figure out who's going to score in the first inning.
Well, we know who's going to score, and that's everybody who's listening to 5 Best Bets. It's available now anywhere you enjoy stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw. Hey, John, let's talk about the legacy of The Undertaker. We've talked a little bit about your on-screen relationship with the real-life Mark Calloway, but is your first exposure to him in World Class in Memphis, or do you see him like I did for the first time as Mean Mark in WCW?
I don't even think I saw him as Mean Mark. I'm not sure. I think because I was working off somewhere, I think I saw him the first time as Undertaker. I think that's where I saw him first. I didn't watch a lot of WCW just because of my schedule and playing. I think I was playing football then, so we're playing on the weekends, and I understand that's just part of the year. But you get used to your Saturday nights not doing certain things, and so I didn't watch a lot of WCW back then. Did later, obviously, but I think Undertaker was the first time I saw him. Now, obviously, I knew of him from Texas, and a lot of guys, Skandar Akbar and those guys thought the world of Taker. So I knew a lot of the same people. I knew a lot of the same places that he had been, but I didn't see a lot of him until he came on the scene as the Undertaker.
We should talk a little bit about his style. I feel like early in his career, there were a lot of comparisons to the Spoiler, Don Jardine, because both of these are big guys who can walk the top rope. Do you see similarities between, Mark Calloway and the Spoiler, at least the early part of his career? Or is the top rope walk really where the similarities end, if you will?
I think the top rope walk was a lot of where the similarities end. Taker had his own style, and he really developed his own style, especially with the Undertaker. You look at him in the very first part of the Undertaker. He did some leapfrogs, he did some he did an arm drag or two here and there. It was really different Undertaker. He really kind of worked his way into it. We talked about Godfather last week when he came out as the Godfather, and Chief was one of the first ones that pulled him aside and said, "Hey, you need to shake like the voodoo guy." So there's always a progression with when you develop a character. You never know it very well until you've done it for a while. And when he first started doing the Undertaker to when he did it, say 3 years later, it was not a complete different character, but it was remarkably different.
I do want to ask you a little bit about Buzz Sawyer. It's a pretty legendary story that Buzz was obviously a famous old-time wrestler that some of us have watched some of his great old classic matches, and what a character he was. If you're watching over on YouTube, you'll see exactly what I mean. It's somethingtowrestle.com. But he had a bit of a reputation for offering to train guys and telling everyone he had a school, and he'd take their money and then poof, disappear on them. I think this happened maybe most famously to The Undertaker and Magnum TA. I think there's a story where Magnum actually tracked him across the country to go find him and demand that he trade him and get some sort of value for his money. Did you ever hear these stories about Buzz Sawyer? And did you hear about Taker's story from Taker?
Yeah, I did. And, these guys were assholes. I saw some guys like that. Every territory I was in, there were guys like this. They would take money from people that had this dream of being a wrestler. A lot of times it was, money, $1,500, $2,500, which back then was a lot of money, especially for a young person that didn't have it. And they just wouldn't do anything. They just take their money. They thought it was funny. They thought it was a work. It wasn't a work. You're an asshole. And there were guys in Texas that did that. I was so dead set against all of that. And Buzz was one of those guys. Buzz was the one that claimed he took the payoff from Ole to break Briscoe's leg when Briscoe sold Georgia Championship Wrestling. And they worked with Buzz. And Buzz obviously didn't try anything. He was blowhard.
Did you have any personal interaction with Buzz?
Nope. Just all from reputation, from the stuff with Taker, from the stuff with Jerry Briscoe. And, Buzz was always the guy that would step up from what I hear. And I wasn't there, so it's all secondhand. But it's secondhand from a person I trust very much in Mr. Briscoe. So it comes from a very good source. And from Taker, who I trust very much. So none of it about Buzz was very good.
What was the best practice back in the day to find a reputable training school or get trained. Like I know these days it's different. You know, we have the internet and you can just Google, you know, and you can certainly just see on social media, you know, this guy's at Flatbacks and this guy's at Nightmare Factory and yada, yada, yada. There's tons of wrestling schools and we know how to navigate that now thanks to the internet. But pre-internet, when people didn't have cell phones and little computers in their pocket and you just had a freaking phone book and a line and on the kitchen wall with a cord that goes 30 feet or whatever. How the hell did you find a wrestling school, John?
And God Almighty, were those phone lines long? You know,
Yes.
you get to like you literally would get a 30-foot phone line so you could walk all over the kitchen and into the living room with it. It was insane. It was so hard back then. I got lucky. I had a guy that trained with Brad Reingens, and you know, you only had a few trainers that really made a difference back then. You know, you had Billy Robinson, you had Brad Reingens, you had Hiro Matsuda, you had Carl Gotch. I mean, you didn't have that many trainers that were really legendary. And you wanted to find one of those guys, because if you found one of those guys and people knew that if you trained with those guys, and it's always been that way, you know, go back to Farmer Burns. You know, you couldn't break in the business back, you know, around 1915. Mr. Briscoe told me, because he was only 40 years old back then, if you weren't trained by Farmer Burns. But it was hard during my day, because unless you were trained by one of these guys. And if you were trained by Carl Gotch or Brad Reingens or Hero, people knew you were trained well. People knew you had been through absolute hell to get through, and people wanted to use you. It was tough when they say, "Oh, I was trained by so-and-so," and you like some person that didn't have a huge name. It was tough to get a job if you weren't trained by one of those guys. And to answer your question about finding them, I have no idea how you'd find them. I got lucky because I played football with Randy Thornton with a guy who knew Brad and hooked me up with Brad. And Brad, you know, I think that's where I got the number even. Must have been, because you didn't have the internet back then. And so I was lucky to get hooked up with Brad, but I would have had no idea how to get hooked up if I hadn't ran into a guy like Randy Thornton.
It's best you understand, the Undertaker's real trainer, not Buzz Sawyer, was Perry Action Jackson. Is that right?
I think so, yeah. He had Perry at the, who was part of the Blackbirds with the Iceman King Parsons, who was the nemesis to the Freebirds. Good tag team, really good tag team, good worker. Perry was a very good worker, Action Jackson. And, Taker had him at his Hall of Fame speech, because Perry had saved him one time also from, I think, getting stabbed or getting shot or something. And so, but yeah, Perry was the one I think that really helped him.
Let's talk a little bit about what makes a good trainer. Just your 2 cents and your opinion, because that's what this is. I'm sure there's no wrong way to do it. There's just different ways to get there. What do you think, if someone listening to this was interested in trying to try their hand at professional wrestling, how do you identify a good trainer, John?
I think you identify it by the outcome of the guys that come through. I think that's the only way you can identify, is by their success of guys that they've trained. Because you have some really good talent that weren't good trainers. I mean, you look at guys that are great athletes, in different sports. They don't always become good coaches. But sometimes you have guys who weren't that great athletes become great coaches. Now, all these guys I mentioned were great athletes. And, to me, see, Brad Reingens was great. I mean, we worked – it was almost, and I say this in a loving way, we worked almost subhuman ways, training with these freaking logs, suplexing these logs, all this Greco-Roman. I mean, it was brutal, but Brad was great to us. Brad never mistreated us. Brad never took advantage of us. I had to work with Brad. I had to shoot with Brad every day for conditioning. And, Brad stretched me for 3 months, but he never hurt me. He took care of me. Some of these guys did. And I think that was wrong. I think that was, guys would hurt them because they could. And that's just chicken shit. That's just taking advantage of somebody. So you kind of had to watch with these guys. But I think the way you figured out who these good trainers were was by the people that they produced. And all 4 of those guys produced great talent.
We got to talk a little bit about, the big break that happens in WCW, at least in my mind. And this is kind of like real sports in this regard. Sid Vicious gets injured taking Scott Steiner's Tilt-A-Whirl Slam. Somehow he winds up with a punctured lung during that process. Any fun at all. Why are you laughing at that?
Because Sid can get hurt walking across the floor. Sid, I love Sid. Sid was a great guy. He is Sid had one of the greatest bodies of all time. But he would take every summer off to play softball. Sid was just nuts. I room with Sid a couple times. I love Sid. I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but boy, Sid was different.
So he gets hurt, and now that creates an opportunity because at the time, Sid is one half of a tag team called the Skyscrapers. He's tagging with Dan Spivey. And when Sid gets hurt, it creates an opportunity for Mean Mark Callis to step in there. And then, he also had an opportunity to be really probably one of the very first Paul Heyman guys. Paul E. Dangerously was his manager in WCW. And you would think that it seems like things are heading in a good direction. Now, when we talked to Bruce about this, Bruce has said that, he was a big fan and an advocate and wanted Vince to take a look. And I guess that the real life Undertaker, Mark Calloway, Mean Mark Callis, had hurt his hip. And he had a match on pay-per-view, as I remember, with Lex Luger. Maybe it wasn't a pay-per-view, but it was a televised match with Lex. And Bruce had said, hey, go watch this, not knowing that Mark had that injury. Vince wasn't all that thrilled as the story goes. Bruce continued to persist, and eventually there was an opportunity there. Now, there's a different version of that story. Ole Anderson got the book in May of 1990 in WCW and famously said he saw nothing in Mean Mark, told him to his face he'd never draw money and nobody would ever pay a ticket to see him. Wow, what a sentence to say to the future Undertaker. But that summer, Mark got an opportunity to play a bit part in a Hulk Hogan movie known as Suburban Commando. Now, Hogan was actually filming this after Earthquake put him on the shelf in WWF on screen. So Hogan has claimed under oath that he saw Mark wrestle on WCW TV and made it a point to get him cast in the movie because he was trying to recruit him to the WWF. I somehow don't believe that that's the version of events that Mark told you about. What do you believe here? How did the transition from WCW to the WWF happen as best you've heard it told from Mr. Undertaker?
I go with Bruce's version. Yeah, I'm sorry. There's a lot of heat now with the Undertaker, I believe, and Hogan, and I think some of it probably comes about from Hogan taking credit for Undertaker's success because I don't think that was probably true. That was something that I think Bruce's story. By the way, how bad is Ole? He ran Georgia Championship Wrestling in the ground too. I mean, just a goof. Thought he's one of these guys who thought he was so smart, and tell a guy that he's never going to make money when you got a guy as big as Undertaker, that's huge, that's athletic. I mean, Undertaker was, I think, a preseason All-American basketball player. He was a great athlete, or is a great athlete. He's older now, like all of us, but he was a great athlete. And you're telling a big guy like that he's not going to draw money. I mean, it's crazy. By the way, him and Spivey, they got a great story where Spivey beat the shit out of the Road Warriors one time. and Taker's like, what's going to happen backstage? Because Spivey apparently went overboard with it. Spivey was a double tough dude, man. And he said, we'll be fine. The Road Warriors came back and thanks, guys. Thanks. It was it. Pretty good story.
I do want to ask you, and I mean this sincerely, like sometimes we hear stories about guys you and I like, and they'll say really horrible things to each other, and we'll hear about that. And in fairness, you and I and old Dave Silva, our producer, we all say really horrible things to each other, but we do it and we kind of respond like you just did. We all kind of chuckle and smile and laugh. So part of me wonders, man, why was Ole such a mean old bastard? Why was he just mean to people? And then I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Out of context, we do that to each other. Do you think there is an alternate version of Ole where, yes, he was an asshole, but an asshole in a funny way? Or was it never funny? He was just an asshole. I say that as someone who never really met Ole. Yeah.
And I've only met Ole. I didn't know him. And right. So I speak only from what I heard, but there's not great comments about Ole. By the way, on our show I think it's dropping soon, the part 4 episode of Jim Barnett, with Tony Richards on the stories of Briscoe and Bradshaw, Mr. Briscoe brings out the knife that Ole stuck in his head, trying to become blood brothers with the Briscoes. His famous hotel room where they met, they're having beers, and Ole grabs a knife out of Briscoe's bag, or Briscoe gives him the knife because Ole wanted to use his blades, and Briscoe said no. Ole grabs the knife and sticks it in his forehead and wants to become blood brothers with the Briscoes. That was all in all the court cases and stuff, but Briscoe has the knife still to this day. He showed it on our last Stories of Briscoe and Bradshaw.
What a crazy story. And even crazier is how The Undertaker makes his official debut. I say official because he had technically already taped matches for TV that would air after the pay-per-view. But the first time we see him on programming is Survivor Series 1990. He's Ted DiBiase's mystery partner, and he's made to look dominant on the way to getting himself counted out. When you first saw the character in the presentation of The Undertaker, did you think this thing had legs, or did you think, oh, well, man, what a stupid WWF silly gimmick? Because at times, this is the same company that brought us the gobbledygooker, or as Bruce would say, gobbledygooker. So
it was a great worker, by the way. I mean, you stuck really great workers in shitty gimmicks.
Yes. Did you think that's what this was? This is a shitty gimmick, and oh God, that poor guy, he's got to play like a zombie. This is going to be a bust.
I think so. I thought so at the time. You know, it's you look at it and you kind of hold back, you know, judgment. But you look at it, there's no way that's going to work. You got a dead guy that's not dead, and then you're going to have supernatural powers, and it doesn't make any sense. You know, Vince was trying all kinds of things after Hogan to try to figure out what worked and what didn't. You know, we talked last week about, you know, Papa Shango coming in, Warrior throwing up all this stuff. You know, you're really trying stuff. No, but you look at that and go, oh, nobody's going to buy that throwing up stuff. Well, people bought the electricity coming out of the ceiling with Undertaker, and the fact that he was buried alive. I mean, I was there in San Antonio when we buried him, and people thought we were killing him. I'm telling you, I was sitting there. I told Crush, who was there with the shovel beside me, selling because his back was blown up. And I said, brother, keep an eye on the crowd. Somebody could jump this rail. I mean, people were buying that we were actually burying him. That's crazy. But, you know, some things work and some things don't. Obviously, we'll get into all this, but the only reason this worked was because of Mark Calloway. No human being alive could have made this Undertaker thing work. That's one of the silliest gimmicks of all time. But Undertaker made it work and made it into one of the greatest characters of all time because of him. No one else. No, I don't think there's another human being on the planet that could have done that.
In fairness, too, I want to give credit to modern era wrestling. I think a lot of quote unquote old timers and even people in the business today, if you would have laid out to them exactly what the Mr. Iguana character was, they would have said, I ain't doing that shit. There's no way. And then you see the reaction and you're like, whoo, I'm
going down to Mexico this weekend. I don't know if it's been announced, but I'm now. Well, it's been come out afterwards, so it doesn't matter. I'm hoping I'm going to clothesline that damn iguana. I'd like to knock his green head off and knock those iguanas everywhere, like little baby iguanas out of the stuff one, like a pinata pin. You know, hit them like little iguanas come out everywhere.
Can you imagine how crazy? Eric pointed this out in our podcast this past Friday. Can you imagine how crazy Halloween is going to be with all those little kids all over the United States dressed up as iguanas running around on Halloween? It's going to look like a scene out of Magnolia, that Tom Cruise movie from 25 years ago.
And think about what gets over. Think about a guy coming out painted up green with a iguana that can do things. I mean, nobody would buy that. Nobody would buy a guy who's dead but undead, has supernatural powers, going to do all this crazy stuff. People go, man, that'll never work in wrestling. We're going into this real era, man. This people have got to be legit. He was legit, but the character, this kid has gotten over this iguana character like $1 million, and Taker becomes one of the greatest characters of all time with this gimmick because he's so good.
Is that how much of that magic is just based on their commitment to the gimmick? Like, I feel like some people would say, because I mean, listen, people made fun of the idea, and people still who didn't watch it would say, oh, Doink, a wrestling clown. How silly, how stupid.
Yeah.
Unless you saw the presentation of Matt Bourne's Doink, and you're like,
Matt Bourne was good.
This is kind of fucking scary.
Yeah, Matt Bourne was good as Doink. Yes. That guy was an evil freaking clown.
Yeah,
I mean, it made a lot of sense. I mean, if Matt Bourne had stayed as that character would have had much longer legs. It kind of became, you know, a spoof later. But Matt Bourne as that character was freaking awesome. And Taker, Taker famously will tell you, he was Undertaker 24/7.
Yes.
I mean, you say he bought into this? You damn right he did. I mean, he would dress as the Undertaker. He would walk as the Undertaker. I mean, he had that look all the 24/7. You didn't see him dressed in white Nike sweatsuit somewhere walking through the airport. He would dress in black. He would dress in cool shit. He would dress in biker type gimmicks. He looked 100% 24/7 like the Undertaker. And that, I thought that was important back then. I think it's important now, but most people don't. I still think it is. But Taker lived that gimmick, and I think that was very important.
That's my question, I guess, is the commitment is the difference, right? Like,
yeah,
the idea that when a guy really embraces it, and I know that people have poked fun at Bruce for years and years on our program because he's said with a straight face, hey, the Red Rooster could have worked if Terry Taylor would have embraced it. And a lot of people, like our buddy Jim Cornette, says it was the fucking shits. It was a terrible gimmick. It shouldn't have ever happened. But again, I think if we just described Doink or The Undertaker or Mr. Iguana, everybody would say the same thing about those gimmicks. But the commitment is what makes it work. Like, I almost feel like, what's that George Costanza line in Seinfeld? It's not a lie if I believe it. Mr. Iguana believes he is Mr. Iguana. Mark Calloway believed he was The Undertaker. I think that's the difference, don't you?
100% I do. And he got that thing over by being the Undertaker 24/7. People would see him in the airports. They knew it was the Undertaker. And if you saw him walking to the airport again in some like Nike white sweatsuit with like Jordan shoes, which were popular back then, popular now, I guess, too. I have no idea. But that wearing that, going through the airport, which he could have easily wore, they go, oh, that's the guy who plays the Undertaker. But when they saw him walk through, they would say, that's the Undertaker. And that's a huge difference. I mean, when he touched people, and I'm talking about touch people as far as walking through airports and going into bars and things like that, people left thinking that is the Undertaker. And he didn't break character for years. And I think there's a lot to that. I just think like these guys who have these outlandish characters or whatever else, and then go on these podcasts and explain the whole recipe and everything, I think they just do themselves a disservice, especially while you're still working. I understand, we're talking about something 30 years old. I think it's a little bit different, but these guys now that will go out there right away, and they had guys back then that did the same thing. Terry Taylor did that. He'd want to be the Red Rooster 24/7. I don't blame him. I don't know if it was a rib or not. I have no idea, but it's never going to work the way he did it. You don't know until you live that character and try to get that character over, if that character is going to work or not. And I think that's what hamstrings a lot of guys today and girls.
Well, there's one thing that we all know listening to this program. We grew up on The Undertaker, and most of us plopped down on a Saturday or Sunday morning to turn on those syndicated programs like Superstars. Man, it was my jam. I couldn't wait until the weekend because I knew I was going to get my wrestling fix. And man, what goes better with that than a big old bowl of cereal? And then we realized, you know what? I don't need a big bowl of cereal. I need protein in the morning, and Magic Spoon is here to hook you up. It tastes nostalgically delicious. Yeah, it's just like the ones you grew up on, except without all the sugar and with a ton of protein. You already know all that, though. But I am proud to tell you that now Magic Spoon has a brand new high-protein granola. And true to the Magic Spoon promise, it's packed with protein and super crunchy. We've been bragging about the treats for Magic Spoon for a while. We've been telling you that they're crispy, they're crunchy, they're airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. They've got great flavors like marshmallow and chocolate peanut butter and dark chocolate, but I double dog dare you to try double chocolate. It's my absolute favorite. I put it up against any sort of snack or treat you can have. But here, you don't have to worry about all the sugar, and you're getting 12 grams of protein. But now the brand new granola packs 13 grams of protein, but 0 added sugars. Magic Spoon's hooked you up with fantastic flavors for this granola too, like dark chocolate almond, honey almond, and even peanut butter. What are you waiting for? Go get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/wrestle, or just look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/wrestle for $5 off. So listen, now that we've got the Undertaker character established here, we're going to have to give him a finishing move. And we all know it's the Tombstone Piledriver. And you'd be surprised how many wrestling fans I run across who believe that that move was named the Tombstone Piledriver because of the Undertaker. But I think it existed long before that. But the Undertaker did do it differently when he first started doing the Tombstone versus the way he sort of evolved to it. There was like one leg over each shoulder, and and then that's what we ultimately wound up with. But now it's kind of like, or back in the day, it was like both on one side. So if you take a look at those early tombstones where all the weight is on one side as opposed to right dead in the middle, it feels like that doesn't give you as much control. I only bring this up because every few years there'll be a compilation video of early Undertaker tombstones from, well, we'll call them enhancement matches. And let's just say that, well, like Coco Beware there at the very first Survivor Series, he didn't have the smoothest landing. It doesn't feel like the safest move. You've taken this move every which way, I'm sure. Obviously, he settles on the best practice and the safest being one leg over each shoulder. Is there a way to safely do it with both legs over the same shoulder? Is that possible?
I would hate to do it that way. I'm glad I took it later after he kind of figured out how to do it, because he looked at some of those early tombstones, and my God, man, it's some of them were pretty bad landings. There's no telling how many times I've taken that tombstone, and I bet it's over 100. It has to be over 100. There's no way it's not, because we used to close every show in 2004, 2005, especially on TV. I'd go out there and cut the promo. That's when I try to give him a break character and end up in the tombstone every single night. So I took it every night of TV. But then on the house shows, of course, I'm doing the job for him. I had a record against Taker like the Worsted Generals against the fucking Harlem Globetrotters. My record is pretty abysmal against him. So I took that tombstone a million freaking times, and he was incredibly safe with it. He never came close to hurting me. I did get cut open a couple times. He had a knee brace, and it slashed my head open one time. And I didn't tell him about it because, no big deal. I got sewed up. And he did it the next night again. So I go to the doctor, and he goes, "Oh, you've already got stitches." I go, "No, this is from last night." So, and then Taker came and goes, "What are you doing?" I go, No. And he goes, and he figured out it was his knee brace that did it. But he was incredibly safe when I was with him. But I don't think you could do it safely with two legs on one side. I just don't think you don't have control. When you have one leg on each side, you have control with it. And he's a big, strong guy. So he was able to do it very safely that way. I think it was Bill Longson, wasn't it, that created the Piledriver?
We're going to skip around a little bit. I want to fast forward to Survivor Series 91. And again, remember, the Survivor Series was created to compete with Starrcade. That was back in 87. So by Survivor Series 91, believe it or not, Undertaker and Hulk Hogan are going to have the very first ever singles match in Survivor Series history. That had never happened at that point. It had always been these tag matches to get the whole squad out there. But this is going to be Undertaker's first singles match, and actually the first singles match in Survivor Series history. And he finds himself wrestling Hulk Hogan for the world title. So 1 year into your debut as this new zombie character that people didn't have a lot of faith or confidence in, and you're headlining a WWF pay-per-view against Hulk Hogan for the title, and you win. Like, when you think about that level of commitment to the character, not just from Mr. Calloway, but from Mr. McMahon. I mean, nobody beat Hulk Hogan back then.
Yeah.
And the idea that he's going to beat Hulk Hogan here feels like this should be one of the proudest and greatest days in his wrestling career. And I think, as the story goes, Mr. Calloway even invited his family to come see this, because let's not forget, it was May the prior year when Ole Anderson told him nobody will ever pay money to see you wrestle. And in November the following year, he's main eventing a pay-per-view and winning the WWF Championship by beating Hulk Hogan. What a fucking story. It should have been a cause for celebration. But in reality, it was not a great memory for Mr. Calloway, because Hulk Hogan claimed that he was injured on the tombstone. Now, if you've ever watched the footage, you ask yourself, his head was a foot away from the chair. His head never hit. But I guess Hogan is trying to convince people at the time that it jarred something loose. And I thought, well, hey, maybe this is just a work. And that was the story they were trying to put out there. But I think that may actually be the reason for the hurt feelings with the real life Terry Bollea and Mark Calloway is that night. Is that fair?
I think it's fair, yeah, because I had somebody claim that I had hurt them, and but that reputation follows you, and you can't get away from it. You know, then all of a sudden people say you're unsafe, say your move's unsafe, and it's a pretty rotten thing to say about somebody that you hurt them, because then people for the rest of your career they hear that. And they're always, I don't know about taking that move, you know. Now, fortunately, Taker goes on to become this iconic character, and people realize that he's about as safe a worker as there is in the history of the business. But I guarantee you, for a while, people are like, I don't know about taking that tombstone, because what Hogan claimed, you know, that's a pretty rotten thing to say about somebody, especially when it didn't happen, which it didn't happen there.
Yeah, that's what sucks to me is, sometimes we all know that Hulk Hogan likes to go into sell mode. And sometimes when you're in sell mode, maybe you can embellish a little bit and use a little creative license. And I mean, I think Dusty Rhodes even famously said something like, hey, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. I love that when it comes to wrestling storytelling. But man, when it really affects perhaps someone's livelihood, and maybe affects their ability, because that to me is, I don't know, a slippery slope, because clearly this led to some hurt feelings. Do you think for a second that Hulk Hogan was ever actually, that Terry Bollea was ever actually hurt, or was he just trying to get character or sympathy for the Hulk Hogan character and he took it too far?
I can't say, 100%. I'm not in Hogan's body, but Hogan's a tough guy. Hogan's not, some punk somewhere that, complained about shit. He obviously had a strategic reason, I believe, to say this. Now it may not have made sense, but again, I think it's a pretty shitty thing to do. To say this about somebody when it's not true, because that follows the guy around. And obviously, Taker is one of these guys. Taker doesn't say anything bad about anybody except Hulk Hogan. It's like Bret Hart and Goldberg. Like, hey guys, Merry Christmas, and fuck Bill Goldberg. It's sort of these like running things, about Bret and Bill Goldberg. And I understand their heat. I'm not making fun of that heat or anything like that. But Taker, he minces no words about Hogan these days. He's not a fan, and I think I haven't asked him. I think it all goes back to this, and I wouldn't blame him if he did. That's a pretty rotten thing to say about somebody. It follows you the rest of your career. I can't emphasize that enough. You can lose a job over that. Almost did.
Well, let's go back to his debut in 1990, because his first big program coming out of the original debut at Survivor Series is a big one. He's going to be feuding with the Ultimate Warrior. Now, this happens after the Ultimate Warrior has lost the title to Sergeant Slaughter and now blown off his issue with Randy Savage. But as a new guy coming in, fresh off of being told by Ole Anderson, you'll never draw money in this business, no one will ever buy a ticket to see you. And now you're working with Ultimate Warrior, the guy who just beat Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. This is another big vote of confidence from Vince, right?
Vince gave him the keys to the car right away. I don't know what Vince saw, but Vince saw something great. Famously, we just did that thing on Jim Barnett on Stories of Briscoe and Bradshaw. And famously, he saw John Cena and told Bruce, that's your guy, before Cena was anybody. Some guys can spot talent. Vince can spot talent. Now, he's been wrong at times, but he spotted Mark, and he knew that he at least thought that this was his guy. You don't do everything that Vince did with Undertaker if you don't think he's your guy. Vince saw something in that big guy, big athletic guy. Vince, I cannot tell you the love that Vince has for Undertaker. And I don't know if that was the right away, but it certainly looks like it. At least the respect he had for him and how much he thought he was going to be the guy for our company, because you put the whole company behind him. I mean, you had him beat freaking everybody. You had him beating Hogan. You had him beating Warrior. I mean, you have him tombstoning everybody. I mean, this is the push that's coming out of hell. And I don't know. I'm sure Vince had no idea what Ole had said. But this is Vince saying, this is my guy, and I'm putting the whole company on him. And it was the right decision.
We know how most wrestlers feel about Jim Hellwig, the real-life Ultimate Warrior. But Warrior broke in Texas, much like Taker did, and they were both in world class. Do you think, what was the nature of their relationship as best you know? Did the real life Mark Calloway like the real life Jim Hellwig? Because I've heard guys like Scott Hall say, hey man, Jim was cool. He had heat because we all wanted what he had, but he was cool. What do you think the relationship was like between Warrior and Undertaker in real life?
I think it was decent. I've never asked Taker about it. I think it was decent. Guys didn't dislike Warrior. Warrior was weird. He was a strange dude. I remember I was sitting in the airport one time. I told you this story before. He had a Warrior hat on. He had a Warrior jacket on. He had a Warrior Halliburton on and all this Warrior stuff. And he had tassels on his jacket walking to the airport. And he goes, I don't know why these fucking marks won't leave me alone. He was just a weird dude. But he was over like crazy. And I don't think there was necessarily a bad bone in his body, a mean bone in his body. Taker breaks in Dallas, and he broke in the right way. I mean, he's out there with freaking Bruiser Brody. I mean, it's not an easy road that Taker took. And so I think Hellwig knew this, knew that, the upbringing through Dallas. And people have a lot of, there's a commonality. It's kind of like college football players hang around college football players. College basketball players end up hanging around college basketball players. I'm talking about when they're 50 years old. I'm not talking about when they're young. And guys from territories had a certain affiliation with that territory with other guys and always felt some type of bond because you came out of that territory. Texas was no different. People that came out of Texas, you had the same experiences, the same people that you met with. You worked with Gary Hart, you worked with Skandor Akbar, you got to work with the Von Erich boys and Fritz and Al Perez and some of these incredible talents. And you had a commonality there, and maybe that was what it was with Hellwig and with Taker. I don't know. I never heard there was any heat there. I never saw any. I was there when Taker, when Warrior came back, and they had good interactions as far as I saw. I don't think there was any heat there.
I love the angle that they set up on the funeral parlor. It's one of the more memorable angles of my childhood. The Undertaker is going to attack the Ultimate Warrior. He's going to put him inside this airtight casket, and it perfectly blends together what the WWF does well. Like, respectfully, if this had happened in WCW, it wouldn't have come off nearly as good. And I know old timers would see this and say, oh, this was corny, this was silly. And I get it, because this is more theater. I mean, this feels more like a play and less like down and dirty NWA wrestling, and I get that. But it's also a real life situation because, they're showing that the Warrior needs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So it added some drama to a wrestling show that might not normally be there. I really like the feud, and I can't help but wonder, man, in an alternate universe, what if somehow, in May of 90, when the Ultimate Warrior is fresh off of beating Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 6, and he's the new world champion. If when Ole tells him you're never going to make money, if somehow the Undertaker was immediately available to the WWF, and he could have been one of Warrior's first opponents, because when Warrior starts his title run, I love Ravishing Rick Rude, and I know you do too. What an iconic 80s figure, an incredible performer. Love his stuff. But as a wrestling fan, we had kind of seen the Warrior Rick Rude thing for a while. Yeah. And I know now Warrior's the champ, and maybe that's a fresh coat of paint, as Bruce would say. But a new opponent, Undertaker, challenging the new world champion Ultimate Warrior. And then, you've still got Hulk Hogan working with Earthquake. That can get me excited. I love the sound of that, John.
Yeah, I do too. And like we've talked about many times about Warrior, that was the untenable situation. I mean, you had Hogan, who had slammed the Giant, 93,000 people put in the Silverdome, and this incredible run with WrestleMania. You had Mr. T there, you had Cyndi Lauper, you had all this stuff. Hogan, you can't ever replicate Hogan.
Right.
You should have had something between Hogan and Warrior, or at least a better list of opponents for Warrior, not ones that he had done before. Rick Rude's one of the greatest of all time. Should have been world champion, by the way. But you have Warrior, it was untenable. I mean, there's no way that Warrior was going to succeed with what he was given.
It's interesting to think, though, because if you could rewrite history, an Undertaker was available to be the Ultimate Warrior's first opponent. Eventually, if Warrior were to drop the title to him instead of Hulk Hogan, Maybe it all looks a lot different. Who knows? What we do know is in Survivor Series 1991, as we kind of fast forwarded a minute ago, Hulk Hogan drops that world title to The Undertaker. And as crazy as this sounds at the time, that makes the The Undertaker, just the 6th champion since the company went national. So you had Hulk Hogan, then you had Randy Savage, and then you had the Ultimate Warrior. I mean, you haven't had a ton of champions here. So when you're thinking about the incredible run of the golden age of the WWF, just being the 6th champion since the company expanded, man, that's pretty rarefied air. Again, it just shows you the trust and faith and vision that Vince McMahon had for this character. And speaking of vision, if you've got a vision to grow your business, you need to go to conradsguide.com. That's where you can hook up with my buddy Eric Nichols and his friends at Envision Marketing Consultants. They taught me how to buy digital 15 years ago. I'd been buying radio and TV, and people kept saying you need to buy digital, but I didn't know what the hell that meant. Well, I placed 2 orders, one with a radio station, one with a TV station. I got no results. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But when I met Eric Nichols, man, my understanding of the space went up. My understanding of what I was buying went up. My leads went up, and my cost per lead went down. If you're looking to get more leads and grow your business as efficiently and effectively as possible, you need to talk to my guy, Eric Nichols at conradsguide.com. I want to be clear. I'm not the owner of this company. I'm not involved in this company. I'm just advocating because I know it works. And if he can do it for mortgages, he can do it for you. I'm talking B2B or retail or food and beverage, manufacturing, even nonprofits. And if your company is doing anything with SEO or pay-per-click or targeted display, or maybe you just want ads on streaming video like Hulu and YouTube and Amazon, conradsguide.com can hook you up right now. And what's great about Eric Nichols and his team is if they take a look and they can't help you and they think you're on the right track, they'll tell you that. And that's worth a few minutes of the peace of mind of knowing you're getting the best bang for your buck. Go right now to conradsguide.com, fill out the fast and easy form, and let Eric and his team get your digital marketing on track. That's conradsguide.com, Envision Marketing Consultants, where smart but simple marketing drives results. Hey, so let's talk about it. We know that The Undertaker, after he's the world champion, and eventually there's going to be an emergency pay-per-view Tuesday in Texas. Jack Tunney arranges sort of an experiment for the company. And in the fallout of Survivor Series, there's going to be an emergency rematch. And it's not on a Saturday or a Sunday. That wasn't always the case for WWE pay-per-views back then because they did have stuff on Thanksgiving, which was obviously a Thursday. But this experiment, Tuesday in Texas, what did you think about that at the time? And have you ever picked Vince's brain about that?
No, but I picked his brain about, different things that he's tried. And he's tried to do a lot of stuff. We tried a million things out. We tried Shotgun Saturday Night. Vince thought he had a hit with Shotgun Saturday Night. He thought he had this really edgy product that was going to be, revolutionary for the business. And, it worked okay. It didn't work that well. That was the same thing with the Thanksgiving paper. Of course, that was a shot at Crockett, with StarCast or Starcade rather being on Thanksgiving and events, front running him. But the Tuesday in Texas was the same thing. I have talked to Vince about the different days he tried, and Vince tried all kinds of stuff. Vince, the good thing about Vince was that his ego was in the product, not in himself. And that's a huge difference with CEOs. So many CEOs, when they do something, their ego is in themselves. And they think, I can't fail here because this was my idea. Vince doesn't care if it was his idea. He didn't care if it was Bruce's idea or Pat's idea. If it's not working, Vince will cut it off. So this is just something else that Vince tried. He tried a million things back in the day trying to figure out what worked. People forget, not everybody forgets. A lot of people will bash him over some stuff like this. Vince failed at a lot of things. But when he succeeded huge. And one of the reasons he succeeded so big was because he was willing to say, day one thinking, which is what he always said, what would you do today? Forget about the money that's already spent. What we do today? We keep doing this or we go to something else? And that's how Vince looked at things.
I appreciate that approach. I do like that. So let's recap. Survivor Series happens with a little help from a chair from Ric Flair that misses Hulk Hogan's head by a foot. The Undertaker wins the world title. Jack Tunney says, whoa, there was shenanigans going on. We got to have an emergency rematch this Tuesday in Texas. Hogan's going to cheat in that match, and he wins the belt back. And Jack Tunney says, okay, enough of the cheating. We're going to crown a new champion at the Royal Rumble. We're talking about the 1992 Royal Rumble, where Ric Flair becomes the world champion. Like, that is an underrated little window in time when you think about the golden age of the WWF, because I get that revenues and gates weren't at the all-time high that they maybe were a few years prior. But when you think about, the first singles match in Survivor Series history, and someone finally beats Hulk Hogan, I mean, at that point, it had really only been the Warrior, and it's a new guy. And then there's an emergency rematch. So we're trying a Tuesday pay-per-view, which was uncommon. And now whoever wins the Rumble is the champion, and it's the former NWA champion. This is an underrated little few-month period of WWF history, is it not?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you had Flair, Hogan, and Taker working this program. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's legendary, man. It just came at the wrong time. It just came at a time when, WrestleMania had kind of played out and Hogan had played out a little bit. Those things happen. And that's why you talk about the business is cyclical. Hogan got this rebirth in the NWO, but this was that down period there. But you got three of the biggest stars of all time. And it's tough when you have a guy like you have a huge star and you put the title on him, you take him off it just a few days later. I kind of question the judgment of that.
What's interesting too is, and I know that everybody laughs at me on this program when I mention it, but I just want to point out when this is happening, as you said, with Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, and The Undertaker, obviously for the prior decade, it's been on the cover of every pro wrestling magazine, a dream match, the NWA champion Ric Flair versus the WWF champion Hulk Hogan. But the third guy in that scenario is 26 years old. It's unbelievable. I mean, that tells you just how amazing this run that The Undertaker's off to. But what's interesting is, in the aftermath of all this, somehow The Undertaker turns babyface. He's going to stop the theoretical ally, Jake Roberts, from attacking Miss Elizabeth with a steel chair. And I don't think that a lot of people, when they take a look at this character, he wants to bury people. He's an undead zombie. It's hard to imagine there being a babyface zombie, but The Undertaker made it work. I mean, is that not as crazy as it is that this character was working in the first place? I think it makes it even more silly when you think about it out of context. Wait, the zombie's a good guy? How does that work, right?
The zombie's a good guy. The zombie is 7 foot tall monster.
Yes.
Who kills people. Oh, yeah, 100%. I don't know how he ever got over. It's hard to be a big baby face. Like Magnum TA needed Nikita, needed somebody huge, because he's so freaking big. Undertaker, you don't have many guys that can work with Taker. Now, Jake could because of who Jake was, but you needed a strong character to work with a huge babyface. That's why Andre had such a problem, being a babyface at times. Who's going to get heat on him? It's almost impossible. And it's almost impossible you got this character that's working, that's crazy because of Taker, and all of a sudden now he's a babyface. Like, who's going to get heat on this guy?
It's a great question, and I think that is the point that a lot of people miss, because man, we've beat up on Bruce over the years about some of the terrible.
It's fun beating up on Bruce. It really is.
It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
But we've had some really terrible opponents for The Undertaker at WrestleMania.
God awful. He worked with some of the worst talent in the history of wrestling. Oh my God. He worked with some horrible talent. He was so good. Vince just thought he could put him out there with anybody, and Mark would figure out a way to make it work. And Mark generally figured out a way to make it work, but he worked with some of the worst talent in wrestling history in the biggest matches in wrestling history.
What's interesting, though, is I want to point out what you were saying earlier. It's really hard to be a sympathetic 7-foot babyface. The nature of wrestling, as I understand it, and what the fuck do I know? I'm a hillbilly podcaster from Alabama, but it does feel like the heel is supposed to, in the dynamics of a match, more often than not, the heel's going to be in control, and he's going to get the heat on the babyface. He's going to beat that guy up and The babyface has to master the art of selling. You might think about a guy like Ricky Steamboat or Ricky Morton. That's kind of what, when people think about babyface selling, that's what they think about. And then they think about the heel just being this guy who has this big dynamic offense and he just bullies everybody, especially if he's much bigger than them. And now if you make that big guy a babyface and his gimmick is he is an undead zombie who's already dead, so you can't really hurt him, and he's about 7 foot tall, but he's a good guy, how the fuck do you book that?
And how do you get heat on him? Because not just because of what all you just said, he doesn't sell.
Yes.
The Undertaker didn't sell. He would blow guys sky high. He'd take a bump and sit up and then start doing something. I mean, he didn't sell. There wasn't a period where like you're getting heat on him and you can leave him in the corner for a minute and catch a breather, or leave him in the corner a minute and work the crowd, or get to the referee. You turn around, he's standing up again and he's freaking taller than you. He doesn't sell. I mean, it is one of the most hard characters, period, especially back in the day, to work with.
So it's a challenge because, as you said, normally in the dynamics of a match, you need the babyface to sell. But now we've got a babyface who's not only bigger than everybody, but he can't sell.
And his gimmick is not selling.
His gimmick, yeah, I'm not saying he doesn't know how. I'm saying
his gimmick is not to sell.
There's not a zombie who's like, oh, I can't kill you today. I got a little hurt elbow. That's not a thing. You're still a zombie, so you got to keep killing. So his opponents wind up being, man, it feels like the original Dungeon of Doom. Kamala, Giant Gonzalez, Mr. Hughes, Yokozuna, Brian Lee is fake Undertaker, Kama, Mabel. I mean, it's a small select group of people he can even work with. There's every reason in the world this character should not have worked, John.
Yeah, 100%. And those are the few big guys that could handle him,
yes.
that could work with him. That's one of the reasons he liked working with Godfather so much in every single iteration that he had. For one, they were good friends, but Godfather could work, and Godfather was a big guy who was safe, and then all of a sudden Vince puts Giant Gonzalez in some type of monkey muscle man suit and puts him out there with him. And it's like, you got to be kidding me.
Did you think there was ever a chance that the fake Undertaker thing with him and Brian Lee could have ever worked? Could it have been bigger? Could it have been more successful?
Yes, I think it could have, because Kane worked. And so, Kane was the same type gimmick that was supposed to be a one-off, but Glenn was so talented, and Brian's very talented, but for whatever reason, that one didn't take off like Kane did. So yeah, I think it could have. It's hard to do that because what are you going to do after they fight each other? What do you do with him then? Then you got to change Brian into something different. That's pretty tough to do. Kane was a little bit different because that was his brother, but I think it could have worked.
Yeah, it is interesting because I kind of like the presentation. I just feel like maybe the timing wasn't right. But they also tried some other weird things. There was the Royal Rumble in '94 where Yoko and his friends killed the Undertaker again. I don't know. But his spirit or soul or something went to heaven. This is a little silly, some creative license. Is this too far for you, or are you still able to suspend your disbelief? Because we are going to be asked to do that a few times with the Undertaker character, as you mentioned, summoning lightning and so forth. But when they did the whole, hey, on a screen, here comes the Undertaker out of the casket, what'd you think?
I thought all of it was hokey. He made most of it work.
Yes.
No one else could have done that. I remember we had one time we were going to have Midian. We're going to sacrifice Midian, which I don't think anybody. I think it's great. I think we should sacrifice Midian now. I love Midian, but we were going to sacrifice him. He was going to levitate above the table or something. And what he did, it was supposed to be like this big special effects deal or something. Anyway, the levitation didn't work, so Vince nixed it. Well, Michael Cole couldn't see it, but he hadn't got the word that it had been nixed. And he goes, he's levitating. And fucking Vince goes, you dumbass, he's not levitating. Vince blew up on Michael. It was great. But we did all kinds of crazy shit in the Attitude Era too. That some of it worked, some of it didn't. We sacrificed people on crosses in the Attitude Era. So there was a lot of crazy stuff done.
Yeah, listen, let's talk about the other piece that we haven't ever discussed. I don't know why he doesn't get mentioned as one of the great managers of all time, but has there ever been a better casting than Paul Bearer as the Undertaker's manager? Like Bill Moody, my God.
He was actually a funeral home director.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a shoot job. Vince loved, guys who were shoot whatever they were from.
Yeah.
Vince loved, finding out about who you are. And, he asked Henry Godwin, famously, he goes, "What do you do?" He goes, "Families are pig farmers or farmers. And what do you wear? Overalls." Okay. That's where Henry Godwin came up with the character, which was awesome. Same thing with Bill Moody. He's a funeral director. But yeah, Percy was fantastic. Percy was terrific with the Undertaker.
Let's also mention that we've got to talk about the Mankind situation, because as we're talking about all these different opponents and how it's really impossible to book this guy because he's so much bigger, Mankind, the real life Mick Foley, is not taller or bigger than the Undertaker, but the character, man, it felt believable. And I think when you think about sort of that OG version of The Undertaker, and I realized the character had evolved a little bit by 1996, I do think that the Mankind Undertaker matchup is probably perfect for both guys, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, Mankind debuted in my debut match on live TV against Undertaker. That's when he debuted, was at the end of the match.
That's pretty fun.
So Taker, think of the weekend he had. He had that match with Diesel. It was very good at WrestleMania. Then the next night he had to work with me, this green kid from Europe. And then Mankind debuted, and then he did a dark match with Vader afterwards. So Taker's like, "What have I done to upset Vince? This is like insane." But yeah, Mankind debuted during the match. My first match with Undertaker, which was the first live match, which was the day after WrestleMania he had with Kevin Nash.
Which version of Paul Bearer did you prefer? I'm asking because I know we're going to talk about the turn here in a minute. And he tried this as more creepy and reserved, and then he tried it a little more over the top. Did you have a preference either way?
I kind of like the creepy and reserved, but Paul Bearer was so entertaining. I mean, he could. The only thing I didn't like was when Paul Bearer tried to be a babyface. Paul Bearer was not a babyface. He was a horrible baby. You look at him in Texas when he was with Eric Embry. I thought he was terrible as a babyface. He was a great heel, one of the greatest. I agree, one of the greatest of all time. I just thought Percy's a natural heel, and so when he would be a heel, it came very natural to him because that's who he is.
The turn, this is something that a lot of people never imagined. I mean, it does feel like Paul Bearer had to be with the Undertaker. He was supposed to be with the Undertaker. That's just, I don't know. It goes together. It's salt and pepper. It's peanut butter and jelly. It's just, that's the way it goes. And the turn, I have to admit, I didn't see coming. I have to admit, I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of the character of the Undertaker. I loved his work and all that, but the idea that you were going to split them apart, I'm like, oh, well, where are they going with this? Did you ever even consider that there might be an alternative where Paul Bearer was managing other guys? I mean, I know he tried that for a bit with Mankind and Vader, but realistically, Paul Bearer without the Undertaker just feels lost, right?
I think he feels lost, and I think he feels tied to the Undertaker still.
Yes.
I think even if he's out there managing somebody else, Vader or Mankind or Kane, it's still tied to the Undertaker because that's his nemesis. It's hard to have Paul Bearer in a separate program, I believe, because he was so tied to the Undertaker, and he's still the mortician. I think it's tough to separate the two. Which, by the way, our first match with Taker, I'm a little bit nervous working with Taker, so I get out there and Dutch Mantell is managing me, and I'm sitting there, and that blue haze comes up, and all the lighters, before the cell phones, all the lighters come up. Man, it was one of the cool things you've ever been a part of. It's like being in Budokan when Stan walked out, romping and stomping with that rope flying fucking everywhere. Man, it was just awesome to see that, until you realize he's coming for you. But I'm standing out there in the ring, and I'm looking at this going, man, this is awesome. And Dutch looks at me and thinks I'm a little bit overwhelmed, which I was. And he goes, just be aggressive. Just be aggressive. So I get Undertaker and I take him in the corner and I'm just waffling him, just trying to be aggressive because Dutch told me. Taker says in the corner, we first started the match, he goes, "I owe you money or something?" And I don't even know him. I'm like, oh my God, I'm fired. And what he was doing, he's trying to get me to relax, which is pretty cool.
What a cool story. I mean, I'll have to admit, I didn't realize that your first match in the company was the night after WrestleMania.
First live match.
Yeah.
Match. So I'd had a couple of, matches, but this was my first live Raw. Undertaker was the barometer. So if you made it with Taker, you were on the roster, and you look at back in the day, back in the mid 90s and late 90s, when new guys would come in, you get a 2-segment match with Undertaker. And that was your test. And if you did, because they knew if the match was bad, it wasn't Taker, it was you. And so if it went well, you moved on to the roster, and whatever happened from then happened. But if it went poorly, you're gone. And so I knew that, I knew how important this match was. And that's why when I took him in the corner, I'm just Dutch's in my head, be aggressive, be aggressive, be aggressive. I'm like, shit, I got to have a job, man. I don't want to go back. I have to go back to Japan every single month. So I'm sitting there just wobbling. He goes, I owe you money. I'm like, oh shit, I'm fired. I'm freaking fired. And he laughed about it, but he was making me feel comfortable. But yeah, that was my first live match that I had.
Hey, you mentioned, hey, do I owe you money? And we're talking about, of course, stiff shots in the corner, some live rounds, if you will. We as wrestling fans, we've always heard that The Undertaker was at times almost like the enforcer, and he didn't always have to do it with action. Sometimes he could just quietly start taping his fists, and it would get people's attention. Who made Undertaker's shit list through the years that you saw? I'm not saying it ended poorly, but once upon a time they got cross and eventually they figured it out.
Yep, they did. And I was not there, but I heard the story from everybody that was there because it's a legendary story. It happened right before I got there to WWE. Viscera had hurt a couple people, and Viscera's actually pretty safe, but he's, Viscera was 500 or 600 pounds, whatever he was. He had landed on somebody. I think he'd hurt Kevin or something, maybe Kevin Nash or something. And Taker had said something to him, and Viscera kind of responded poorly about it. Taker thought that he was, being reckless with guys, which he may have been. And Taker's sitting there, and he's talking to Viscera, and as he is, the legend from all the guys that saw it, Taker's just sitting there just taping his fists because he's about to punch this big son of a bitch, and he don't want to break his hand. And so, needless to say, the message got across, and Viscera decided that he was going to agree with Taker. And, Viscera is a good dude. And, I don't know what happened with, the injuries, but things got straightened out pretty quick. Taker didn't have to say much, but the little taping of the fist was a legendary story.
I got to ask about, when people think about The Undertaker, they think about his off the field antics. And sometimes what comes up is my man was a legendary drinker. And I'm not going to say that, he's up there with the Ric Flairs and the Andres with those level of stories, but I have heard that, man, he could just go and go and go, a tolerance like nobody else. What was drinking with The Undertaker like back in the day?
I'll put him up there with those guys. I mean, I never drank with Andre, but I've never seen anybody drink more than Undertaker and be fine. I mean, it was ridiculous how much Undertaker could drink. Him and Godfather, I mean, I always say that they were the original APA. I mean, those guys were legendary. They'd sit there and just drink bottle after bottle of Jack Daniels. And they would get up the next morning and go to the gym, catch a 6 a.m. flight. You would see them. Now, they'd be selling a little bit. They'd have their sunglasses on and not like, everything, but they wouldn't sell. They wouldn't. No, Taker has a funny story where he'd been out drinking one night and Taker never sold. I mean, nothing. He didn't sell nothing. He's like Ron Simmons. So he's sitting there in the back and he thinks, man, I gotta lay down somewhere, but I can't let the boys see me do this because that's bad image. He wouldn't sell. So he goes and gets in his casket backstage. He gets in his casket and starts taking a nap. Well, in the meantime, he's in the casket taking a nap. People have gathered around the casket just talking like they do normally backstage and things. Well, he's been asleep for a while in the casket. And then all of a sudden he wakes up and he opens up the casket and he realizes that people are all around the casket, like not the boys or girls, but like different people in the company and like people that are with the building and things. And when he does, he opens up the casket. He realizes that people are sitting there right around it. He sits up, gets out of the casket, walks off. They're like, dude, that's real.
Wow, what a story.
Can you imagine you're sitting there in a casket, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the casket opens up. You have no idea somebody's in it. It's Undertaker, and he gets out and walks out.
No.
Yeah, he was legendary drinking. I mean, I cannot even tell you how much copious amounts of booze. That's coming from a guy with me and Ron who drank a ton. I mean, that guy, it was unbelievable what he could drink and be fine and show up the next day. He didn't show up late. It was ridiculous. That man's got an iron constitution.
We should mention that we know that on the heels of the turn from Paul Bearer, the Undertaker's going to reinvent himself. He's going to come down from the heavens at Madison Square Garden at the top of the arena at Survivor Series 96. He's totally recreated himself. He's got more of a vampire type look. He's got like these bat wings. He's got the teardrop tattoo. He's going to continue to evolve that character. And then we see the character continue to evolve where Paul Bearer starts teasing that there's a secret. We know eventually this leads to the debut of Kane. But what gets lost a lot of times when people talk about The Undertaker and they talk about Hell in a Cell, I feel like they always go to Mick Foley's match, and I understand. Of course, that was June of 98. But back in October of 97, the very first Hell in a Cell, wouldn't you put his match with Shawn at that first Hell in a Cell up there against almost any match in WWE history?
That was amazing. Him and Shawn had such incredible chemistry. I mean, just incredible. We'll talk about WrestleMania 25 later, which I think is the greatest wrestling match probably of all time. I don't know of one better. I've told you, I saw St. Clair and Finley in Europe. I thought maybe equaled it, but I've never seen anything better than what him and Shawn did. Him and Shawn just had incredible chemistry, which is kind of cool because those guys, they according to them, not just me saying this because I wouldn't say it unless they had said it. They didn't get along that well back then. They didn't really have a great affinity for each other. But man, when they got in the ring, my God, it was magic.
Let me ask you, why do you think their chemistry was so good? Like, why did it click so well with Undertaker and Shawn? Is it the style of work, their mind for the business, and they just saw it the same way? Was it just the styles that they did? I mean, is it the size? Is it the characters? Is it a combination of all that?
All of it. Combinations make fights. You look at a fight with Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. Those are three of the greatest fights of all time. They famously said, two champions went down to Manila, two old men came back because they beat the shit out of each other. Foreman didn't match up with Frazier. And so the fight wasn't good. Foreman just killed him. The styles between Undertaker and Shawn were a perfect matchup. Shawn was the ultimate fight from underneath guy. As a heel or a babyface, which is quite remarkable. You think as a babyface, that's easy. But even as a heel, I mean, Shawn was really good, and he always understood the size difference. Rey Mysterio was the same. X-Pac was the same. A lot of guys really understood the size difference. Shawn understood it completely. It was just a perfect matchup of this great big monster against this heartthrob in Shawn Michaels. Man, that matchup is just something, that's why it sucked so bad when Shawn got hurt in the late 90s. The matchups that were robbed from the world with him and Steve, with him and Taker, I mean, it could have been incredible what Shawn could have done. Now, he came back later, which I don't think anybody could have done, and was just as good, which is remarkable. It tells you how great Shawn is. But the matchup to me was just perfect.
I want to ask you a little bit about, when we're thinking about this era, I don't know that we've ever spent a lot of time really even talking about what made that first Hell in a Cell so special. But it really boils down to like the ones that came after, like you think about Mankind and The Undertaker, those are two monsters going at each other. But the original idea behind the Hell in a Cell, the cage with a top on it, I mean, that's really what we're talking about, is Undertaker didn't want Shawn to be able to run away and escape. And that's because they had a series of matches leading up to this pay-per-view. And even when Brett was the champion and he was working with the Patriot, they weren't going on last for the title. It was often Shawn and The Undertaker who were, but there were some non-finishes and things like that. So we now have this match as almost like punishment for the Shawn Michaels character. And maybe one of the reasons guys like you and I like this one so much is instead of it being two monsters locked in a cage, now we get to see it from Shawn's perspective. He resorts to being inside the confines of the Hell in a Cell, a chicken shit heel running for his life. And now we get to see the story of, hey, here's a quote unquote regular guy locked in a cage with a monster.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe is the reason we liked it. But one of the things that led to the creation of this is those non-finishes at the In Your House Is on the Way. September comes to mind. I think that was Ground Zero. But I wanted to ask you, because I think it's that show where the Undertaker goes flying over the top rope with a dive. And this is one of, if not the very first time we saw him do that move. We realize it's going to become a bigger part of his repertoire. He even dusted off at WrestleMania 25 and lands right on his head. So thankfully, nothing important. But when you see, because you're in the locker room at that point in 97, when you see a 7-footer dive over the top rope the same way, and I'm not saying with the same amount of grace, but this is a move that's normally reserved for luchadors. Like if Juventud did it, or Psychosis did it, or Rey Mysterio did it, we'd all be like, oh, okay. But when a 7-footer does it, does everybody in the locker room go, whoa, what's going on here? Not just because, hey, I didn't know he could do that. There's some real athleticism. He's super agile. But it does feel like in that era, guys would say things like, you're a giant. You got to wrestle like a giant. You don't do that. That doesn't belong to you, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
When you see the Godfather of WWE, for lack of a better word, at 7 feet dive over the top rope, do you look around in the back and say, shit, I can't do that. I got to find a new place to work. What is he doing? He's got to wrestle like a big guy. He's blowing up my spot here. What do you think when you see that?
I'm thinking the same thing. I think when you watch these like videos on Instagram, when people talk about Jordan back in the day, you know, I've always said that like Shawn Michaels was our Jordan. Well, Taker was that same level of respect of he was just better than everybody else. And so you're sitting back in the back. It's almost expected, you know, like it's expected that Jordan jumps from the free throw line with his tongue out and dunks a basketball. No one else in the world can do that, but it's almost expected because that's Jordan. It's almost, you're sitting there watching these two great legends and you know these are the best we got. And all of a sudden they pull something out of the hat like that. You realize they're going to the well and you realize you're watching something really cool. You know, that's not something you pull out in a house show in Poughkeepsie. Right. No offense against Poughkeepsie, but Poughkeepsie sucks. So, but that's not something you pull out in a house show anywhere in the world. That's something you pull out on a major pay-per-view. And when you're watching it, it's almost like that's kind of what we were hoping would happen. You know, these are our two best, and they're out there doing their thing. And all of a sudden they pull something like that out of the hat, and you're like, we knew they would. We didn't know what it was. We just knew they're going to do something great.
We know that they did something great the next month at Hell in a Cell. And what gets lost on this, as you and I were just heaping praise on that match, is it too has kind of what guys in the business might call an F finish, because it's the debut of Kane, who's going to come down, rip the door off the cage. It's crazy, but that's what happens. And we see the debut of a new character, and we still all love the match. But I just want to put this in the back of everyone's mind. Those guys went out there and wrestled that night, knowing that they found out that very same day that one of their brothers, Brian Pillman, had passed away.
Yeah.
And the idea that they had to block all of that out and go out there and perform, because as harsh as it sounds, the show goes on. I mean, all of these people have bought tickets. We've advertised the pay-per-view. They're going to continue the show. It's not the Owen thing, but man, it's fresh in the back of your mind that this guy I was just on shows with a couple of nights ago. He's no longer with us. He was supposed to be here and have a match, and now he's not. And they go out and put on just a once-in-a-lifetime performance. You know, people talk about Brett Favre's performance in that Monday Night Football game where he found out his dad passed away. This might be, or Jordan's flu game. This might be like the wrestling equivalent of one of those, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree, because Pillman was a very loved guy. You know, people liked really a little love Brian. And we were just in 2 days before, we were in St. Paul. We wrestled across the river in Minneapolis, and that's where last time we saw Brian. Then we worked in, I guess it was St. Louis, and then drove across to Kansas City, and we found out that Brian had passed away. And you know, we were literally just with him, and so there's a lot of these guys. You know, it's one of the things. You know, a lot of people don't. I know they do kind of understand. You know, you miss so many things with your family when you're, especially with a wrestler back in the day. You're on the road all the time. You know, you miss these things. You have deaths. You have all this stuff, and the show goes on. You know, and you can say right or wrong. I mean, what are you going to do? I don't know. I mean, you have an obligation to the fans, and those guys went out there and performed their ass off, and that's what we do. They're better than the rest of us. Talking about Sean and Taker, but still, that's what you do.
It is interesting to think about the mentality those guys had to have going into that match. And of course, we mentioned Kane is going to debut at the end of the program, at the end of the match. He's going to come in, the former Isaac Yankem DDS, the former fake Diesel, now has a mask and a bodysuit and lifts in his boots. And as he goes to tombstone the Undertaker, I think the mask moves on him. He's not exactly sure where the hard cam is, so he finds himself just spinning to find it. I mean, this could have went left a million different ways. And I know we're talking about the Undertaker, but I think if anyone were to have been told, hey, here's what we got in mind for the Kane character and lay it all out, I think they probably would have reacted in a similar way they would have when they heard about the Undertaker persona in 1990 and think, oh, this is a 6-month run, maybe a year, maybe 18 months. No one could have ever imagined the longevity that the Kane character would have. But I do think it's important as we give credit to Glenn Jacobs for his performance because he did all the work. The foundation for that was laid by the Undertaker character, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, from Glenn talking about this was supposed to be a one-off. They weren't going to do this for a long time. They didn't plan on Glenn going in the Hall of Fame as Kane and still being, one of the biggest stars in the history of the business as Kane. They planned on this being a very short-term deal. I remember when Glenn walked back in, I was sitting there with JR, and Glenn walked in. It looked like he put on 40 pounds of muscle. I mean, he was big when he was Isaac Yankem. He was big when he was the fake Diesel. But when he came back as Kane, he came back, as JR would say, that boy came back to play. He did. I mean, the kudos to Glenn Jacobs. That is a lot of hard work. That's what I, like Gunther, when he comes back and he, Vince says lose weight and he transforms his body. Jordan Grace, transformed her body. And it's a lot to be said when you put that work into yourself. And Glenn Jacobs, the responsibility for Kane getting over is 100% on Glenn Jacobs. Again, no one else could get over that Undertaker character except Mark Calloway. No one could get over that Kane character except Glenn Jacobs.
I can't wait for us to spend some more time talking about the Undertaker. I do want you to tell us some fun Undertaker stories, but before we do, I want to remind everybody that it's no fun having credit card debt. You've heard me talk about how credit card debt is now over $1.21 trillion here in America. And according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, 60% of credit card holders are carrying a credit card balance. Well, that's bad news if you fall into that category because the average interest rate on credit cards right now in America is 23%. You can do better than that. But I think a lot of people are living with some economic uncertainty, to say the least. But I think the solution you've been looking for has been hiding in your house this whole time. Not in your basement, not in the junk drawer in your kitchen, not in the attic. No, it's in the equity in your house. You see, your house is still worth more than what you paid for it. Why not leverage that equity to make your life a little easier? We just did that for Bo, a machine operator right here in Alabama. He had some vehicles give him some trouble around the same time. That brought on a whole new wave of unexpected expenses. And if you've got young drivers, you know what I'm talking about. All of a sudden, you go from 2 cars at the house to 4 cars at the house. Man, when it rains, it pours. He didn't know what to do. So instead of taking out new debt, he called us, his friends in the mortgage business at SaveWithConrad.com. Not only were we able to help him get a plan together, but we helped him get the cash he needed to pay off his debt. And we even showed him how to get more affordable homeowners insurance. But most importantly, the car situation is no longer a stressor and life is back to normal. And if whatever you've got going on in your life, if you've got credit card debt, maybe you've got some things around the house you've always wanted to do. You wanted to upgrade your kitchens or bathrooms or put in a pool or add a man cave or a home theater. No matter what you've been putting off, I want to go ahead and tell you, run the numbers with me right now at SaveWithConrad.com. And I recently had a conversation with one of our listeners who felt like, hey, I should have done this years ago. Well, why didn't you? I asked. And he said, I was just ashamed because I had mismanaged my finances. I was embarrassed that I had ran up credit card debt. Hey, guys, stuff happens. I want to be your mortgage advisor for life. I've seen over 100,000 credit reports. There's nothing we can't fix. You just got to have the guidance and the knowledge and a plan. I want to help you plan to make your life easier. Here's what I mean. How many years do you have left on your house? When will you pay your house off? I want to make sure that you retire on time. You don't saddle your kids with student loans. And if you got a little extra time and you want to keep working after you've paid your house off, why not get that vacation house one day? But life's too short to have all this unnecessary stress. My grandfather used to say, son, there's no stress like money stress. If that's your situation, there's probably a smarter way to pay your debt back. Here's what I mean. Like Bo, for instance, his credit card debt, if his interest rate was the United States average, it was 23%. Well, it's no mystery that I can get you a better rate than that, but I can also get you a greater tax deduction. The result is you're going to save hundreds of dollars a month, and you get to take a summer vacation from house payments. How about that? No house payments in July or August. You're done until September 1st. And come September 1st, you're going to be saving a boatload of cash. You don't need money out of your pocket. You don't need perfect credit. There's no cost. There's no obligation. What are you waiting for? Let me run the numbers for you right now at savewithconrad.com. And as a reminder, when you work with us at savewithconrad.com, you get our year 3 guarantee. You see, all the experts seem to agree that interest rates are going to improve over the next 3 years, and we don't want you to miss out on that. So let's start saving money today with a much better deal at savewithconrad.com. And when rates improve over the next 3 years, we'll throw you another refinance without charging you a whole new set of lender fees. That's going to give you the peace of mind of knowing that you've got the best deal for your family right now, and you're not going to waste money later in the future. And we can help you save money for your family with my family. Hell, you may wind up working with my dad. Go right now to savewithconrad.com, NMLS number 2129, equal housing lender, savewithconrad.com. John, the legacy of the Undertaker, man, we could do this podcast until next week's episode. We're gonna press pause on his timeline of his storyline, and I want to just have a minute for you to tell some fun real life Mark Calloway stories, because I know that all the guys treat him with such reverence. We've seen that iconic photo. You referenced it on last week's episode from sort of the back of the bus, and that feels like that was Undertaker's domain. Is that true? And before that, was that Andre's spot as you understood it?
Oh, yeah, that was Andre's spot. Yeah, and as I understood, and I wasn't on the buses with Andre, but I was on the buses with Stan, and, you kind of got passed down. Stan had that back seat, if you wanted it, but there was always that back seat in the bus, that had, no leg room in front of it because it was the back row of the bench, and there was nothing directly in front of it. So that was always Andre's seat, and then it was Yoko's when Yoko was there, but mainly it was Taker's, because of respect. So they always left that seat there for Undertaker back in the bus. Now, some buses are configured differently, like that, some of the bus photos that you saw were configured differently. But the bus that just had the 2 seats on each side going up in the back row, that back seat was always Undertaker's chair. And it's kind of cool. It's just kind of a little respect thing that the guys had for the Undertaker.
I do want to ask, when you're on the road and you're traveling with the Undertaker, like we've heard Bruce tell the story before that he would share a car back in the day with Paul Bearer. In later years, who were some of Undertaker's riding partners between towns?
He rode with Glenn a lot. They rode together a lot when they were doing stuff together, especially when they're tagging together. Obviously not when they're working together. They both kayfabe. I remember one time I was riding with Glenn, it was just me and Glenn, and Glenn had like a towel over his head and a ski mask on. And we walk out of the building because we had to get to the next town. So we sneak out before the crowd. There's one fan out there, and Glenn has this towel over his head and a ski mask. And the guy yells, "Hey, Glenn, can I get an autograph?" Glenn goes, "I'm kayfabing this shit. He's got so bad about it.
I have a note here that you sent me that just says Shrek in Ireland. What the hell is that?
Oh yeah. It was. Oh, my God. Thank God Big Show is a friendly giant. Thank God, because he would have killed all of us. Big Show loved Taker. We used to go golfing together, me, him, and Crush. And Crush would always, how you unlapped the guy's golf bag, somewhere during the thing. So when he takes off in the golf cart, his golf clubs fall and balls go everywhere and clubs go everywhere. Crush got Big Show every time we played. He'd get him somewhere at 18 holes. He'll be out there drinking beer. Big Show would forget about it or something. And Crush would get, and Big Show thought it was just the funniest thing because he loved Taker. Big Show's just, thank God, is a friendly giant. But we're in Northern Ireland, and my wife was with me, and she had a Shrek card. She loved Shrek. And so Taker said, can I have that for a rib? And my wife's like, I don't know. She didn't want to get rid of her Shrek card. And so finally she goes, I said, up to you. But my wife said, okay, fine. So I had some fan go up to Big Show, and he was at a point where, he can't go anywhere. I don't look that different except for size, but Big Show is a giant, so he gets bothered everywhere he's been. People were just hounding him at the bar, wanting autographs, wanting this, that. So we sit over there with a young girl, says, hey, can I get this signed, your picture signed? And Big Show goes, not right now. I mean, he signed 1 million autographs. He goes, not right now. Me and Taker are sitting there watching him. And so she goes, no, I really want it signed. And he goes, not right now. He goes, just come back. And she goes, I really want it signed. It's a picture of you. And finally, Big Show grabs it. He's mad. And it's a Shrek card. And I hear Big Show tell it. He goes, I look around and he goes, and you and Taker just duck down right quick to try to hide from who it was. The music that was played the time in the ring in Germany, I think it's Germany. It's Germany. Oh, it had to be Germany. Was I'm not going to say, well, I think I've said it before. It slipped out. Obviously, I didn't play it because I'm in the ring. Now, there could have been a dead man at the DJ booth that might have been orchestrating all this. That's when Big Show comes to the ring, and me and Kurt Angle are in the ring, and we're going to a triple threat match. And in the middle of his entrance, hey, now, you're an all-star. Get your game on. And Kurt Angle looks at me and goes, what is that? I said, that's Shrek's theme music. Now, here's the Olympic gold medalist. He goes, he's going to kill us. Big Show turns red. I mean, red. And he starts sprinting to the ring. And I'm like, oh, my God, he is going to kill us. So I said, don't worry, Kurt. I'll take all the heat. As soon as he climbs in the ring, I said, I swear Kurt did it. I had nothing to do with it. I jumped out of the ring. And Big Show chased us around. Thank God he's a pretty agile giant, by the way. He's a really good athlete. He finally got me in the corner. I said, go ahead and chop me. I know. Well, he chopped me so hard, Conrad. I thought he broke my ankles. He chopped me in the chest so hard. I've never been hit like that in my life. Like, oh, my God, you've hurt me. I'm going to have to go to the hospital. So on the trip back, now this is all on one tour. He's sitting on the plane next to Undertaker. Now, Undertaker knows what's about to happen. And the flight attendant comes up, and Big Show's on a rant. He goes, I know it's just John, but I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And Taker's sitting there going, I don't blame you. I just don't blame you. He's egging him on. And Big Show goes, I'm a giant. I'm a real giant. And I'm going to kill John. I know John is just being John. He goes, but I'm going to kill him. And Taker's like, I don't blame you. Sometimes you just got to do that. And the flight attendant says, sir, would you like this? He goes, not right now. And he keeps on this rant about me. Like he goes, I'm just fed it. I've had enough. Now, obviously, Conrad, when I'm in the ring with Kurt Angle, I didn't play the music.
No,
I obviously have an accomplice. It's not, I may have helped direct this, but I've got an accomplice at least. But I'm getting all the heat for it. So, and Taker just let me have it all. And he's like, I'm going to kill him. The flight attendant goes, sir, would you like this? And she keeps trying to hand him something. And he's like, not right now. And finally he grabs it, and it's a Shrek fun book. And I'm sitting there, I think, I'm in the back of the plane. I got one aisle. He's going to kill me. He's absolutely going to kill me now. And he looks at it, and you see him just start seething. And then he starts crumbling it in those big giant hands. And I'm like, oh, my God, he's going to kill me. And then he looks at Taker, and he goes, okay, that's funny. Thank God.
Man, what a great story. I love hearing these old Undertaker stories. We're going to have more Undertaker stories in the future. We're going to cut our conversation now because we're right at the 2-hour mark. We could talk about the Undertaker forever and ever. But one thing that I do want to mention before we get out of here, John, and I know that we can't necessarily announce everything, but I do feel comfortable enough announcing that I think we're going to have a new confirmation for StarCast. Arlington, July 12th, right there in Dallas, a couple of blocks away from Globe Life Field in the shadow of Cowboy Stadium. John Layfield is coming to StarCast, and boy, do we have a Texas-sized panel planned or what? No spoilers, but I've told you some of the names. This is a who's who of Texas wrestling, is it not?
This is probably the greatest panel I've ever been on. I can't think of one any better. This is when you announce the names that's going to be on this Texas panel. It's crazy who's on this thing.
Come join us. It's the legends of professional wrestling and all the stars of today. They're going to be there. Starcast, STARRCAST.com. We're doing it at the Sheraton in Arlington. What you need to do, and I encourage you strongly to do this, go buy a platinum bracelet right now. It's going to give you access to all of our events that weekend. You're going to have a blast. There's going to be panel discussions on Friday and on Saturday. We might even have some late evening shenanigans on both nights. But there's going to be an opportunity for you to do meet and greets and buy some cool merch and all that stuff. But the stories that you're going to hear here, I want to be clear, they're not going to be broadcast. We're not streaming this on Fight or Triller or anything like that. So you're going to hear stories you can't hear anywhere else. And you heard a guy like John who loves the history of wrestling just as much as you and I, the listener, do. And he's thrilled to be on stage with these names. You can only imagine who's next. So, John, I don't know if we jumped the gun by announcing that you're going to be with us, because I don't think it's even been announced on StarCast socials yet. But I wanted to let everyone on this show know, hey, man, make your plans to be in Dallas. Come hang out with John and I. We're going to have a blast in Dallas. It's Arlington at the Sheraton, July 11th and 12th. A who's who of professional wrestling and a Texas-sized panel that when I laid out the names, I got to admit, John, before I asked you to come to StarCast, I thought I'd stack the deck. And I made it to where it was kind of impossible for you to say no. Did I not?
It wasn't kind of impossible. It was impossible. I am shocked that I am on the stage with these guys. It's that big. I mean, these guys are my heroes. These guys that I've been in the ring with nearly all of them, which is quite an honor. But man, these guys are guys that I would collect autographs and pictures from. This is going to be one of the coolest things literally that I've ever done. This is something that I'm going to talk about for years ago. I got to be on stage with Nolan Ryan when a DJ friend was retiring out of WBAP, I think in Dallas. And I mean, I think about this like that. I'm like, this is pretty cool. I get to be out there with these guys this is something I'm going to cherish the rest of my life.
And I'm going to tell you now, we're doing a pro photo op with all of those legends. Yes, you'll be able to get an individual photo with John and by all means, bring your action figures and your JBL merch, and John will sign all that stuff. But man, you want to talk about something that just knowing you, John, you're going to get one of those photos at this pro photo op, and it's going to go in the wall in your office right there. Is it?
It will be somewhere here in my office. I guarantee you. I got a picture over there with me and Arnold, with me and Rocky, and some old guy, a lot of guys. But this will be in a prime spot here in my office. I got one great one up there with me and Vince, and it's going to be in a prime spot in my office. It'll be forever in my office.
Every single person on the stage, bona fide Hall of Famer. You don't want to miss it. I'm super excited about this panel. John is going to be there. You need to be there. I think we might even get Dave Silva there. He's a drive now. We'll see. Dave, go buy your bracelet right now. STARRCAST.com. Grab those bracelets, and we'll see you guys next week right here on Something to Wrestle with John Layfield. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.